Hey there, welcome back. Get yourself comfortable, grab a blanket if you need one, maybe turn the lights down a little bit. Tonight, we're going on a long one. We're going to walk through the entire story of The Walking Dead. All of it. Every season, every major twist, every heartbreak. From the very first scene of the very first episode, all the way through to the final moments of the series finale. 11 seasons, 177 episodes, 12 years of television, and we're going to cover the whole thing. Now, if you've seen the show before, this is going to be a nice trip down memory lane. You're going to remember things you forgot about. Characters who haven't crossed your mind in years. Moments that made you gasp or cry or throw something at your screen. And if you've never actually watched The Walking Dead, or maybe you started it and fell off somewhere around season 4 or 5 like a lot of people did, well, tonight you get the whole story. Beginning to end. No need to binge 177 hours of television. I'll walk you through it. Before we get into the story itself, let me give you a little background on the show. The Walking Dead started as a comic book series written by Robert Kirkman and published by Image Comics. The first issue came out in October of 2003, and it ran for 193 issues before Kirkman decided to end it in 2019. The comic is excellent, by the way, and in a lot of ways it's actually quite different from the show. Some characters who die early in the comics survive much longer on television, and vice versa. The show took the skeleton of Kirkman's story and built its own version on top of it, which is part of what made it so interesting for people who had read the comics. You never quite knew what was coming. The television adaptation was developed by Frank Darabont, a name you might recognise. He directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, both based on Stephen King stories, both incredible films. Darabont brought that same eye for human drama to The Walking Dead, and the pilot episode he directed is, in my opinion, still one of the finest hours of television ever made. Sadly, Darabont was fired after the first season due to behind-the-scenes conflicts with AMC, which is a whole story in itself, but his fingerprints are all over the show's DNA. The Walking Dead premiered on AMC on October 31st, 2010, Halloween night, which honestly is kinda perfect for a zombie show. And from the very beginning, it was a phenomenon. The ratings were massive. At its peak, the show was pulling in over 17 million viewers per episode, which is just absurd for a cable television show. For context, that's more than most network shows were getting at the time. It became the most watched series in cable television history, and it wasn't even close. Over the years, it spawned a whole universe of spin-off shows. Fear the Walking Dead, which ran for 8 seasons. The World Beyond, a 2-season limited series. Tales of the Walking Dead, an anthology series. And then more recently, Dead City, which follows Maggie and Negan in Manhattan. The Daryl Dixon series, which somehow puts Daryl in France. And The Ones Who Live, which finally tells us what happened to Rick Grimes after he left the main show. We'll touch on the spin-offs here and there, where it's relevant, but tonight is really about the main series. The flagship, the one that started it all. One more thing before we begin. Throughout this whole story, there's something important to keep in mind. The Walking Dead was never really about zombies. I mean, yes, there are zombies in it. A lot of them. They're there in every episode. But the show was always about the people, about what happens to human beings when the rules disappear, when society collapses, and there's nobody to call for help, and the only thing that matters is keeping the people you love alive for one more day. That's the real story. The zombies are just the weather. They're the backdrop, the storm that never stops. The real danger, over and over again, comes from other people, and from the choices you have to make to survive. All right, that's enough preamble. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to King County, Georgia, and a man named Rick Grimes. The very first scene of The Walking Dead is actually a flash forward. We see Rick, in his sheriff's deputy uniform, walking through the wreckage of an abandoned gas station. There are overturned cars, trash everywhere, dead silence. He's carrying a gas can, and as he's walking between the cars, he spots a pair of small feet in slippers. A little girl. He crouches down, and she turns around, and we see that she's a walker. A zombie. She's dead, but she's moving. She's shuffling toward him with empty eyes and a ravaged face. And Rick, after a long, heartbreaking moment, shoots her. The show cuts to black. And then we go backward in time to before everything fell apart. Rick Grimes is a sheriff's deputy in King County, Georgia. He's a good man. Quiet, principled, the kind of guy who thinks before he speaks. He's married to Lori, and they have a young son named Carl. Rick's best friend and partner on the force is Shane Walsh, and the two of them are close. Brothers in everything but blood, but there are cracks in Rick's personal life. He and Lori have been having problems. Nothing dramatic, just a slow drift that happens in marriages sometimes. A distance neither of them knows how to close. One day, Rick and Shane respond to a call. A high-speed chase. The suspect crashes, and a shootout follows. During the chaos, Rick is shot. The bullet hits him in the side and he goes down. The last thing he sees before losing consciousness is Shane leaning over him, yelling his name. And then Rick wakes up. This is where the show truly begins, and it's one of the most iconic opening sequences in television history. Rick wakes up in a hospital bed. He's alone. The room is dark. The IV drip is dry. He calls out for a nurse. Nobody answers. He pulls himself out of bed, stumbles to the hallway, and finds the hospital abandoned. The lights are off. There's medical equipment scattered on the floor, dried blood on the walls, a gurney overturned in the corridor. He pushes through a set of double doors and finds them chained shut from the other side. Someone has written a message on the doors in spray paint. It says, "Don't open, dead inside." And behind those doors, you can hear something moving, something groaning. Fingers start pushing through the gap between the doors. Rick doesn't understand what's happening. He can't. He was asleep when the world ended. He walks outside the hospital and finds a loading dock full of bodies. Hundreds of them, wrapped in sheets, laid out in rows. Some of them covered in flies. The scale of it is staggering. And he's alone. Completely, totally alone. He stumbles home. Lori and Carl are gone. The house is empty. The neighborhood is empty. Everything is silent except for the sound of his own footsteps and the distant hum of insects. He sits on his front porch and wonders if he's lost his mind. And then he meets Morgan Jones. Morgan is one of the most important characters in the entire show, even though he disappears for long stretches at a time. When we first meet him, he's holed up in a house near Rick's neighborhood with his son, Dwayne. Morgan is the one who explains to Rick what happened. The dead are coming back to life. They're walking. They're attacking the living. They eat people. The only way to stop them is to destroy the brain. And it happened fast. Within a few weeks, the military was overrun, the government collapsed, and the world as everyone knew it just stopped. Morgan's wife Jenny is among the dead. She's a walker now, and every night she wanders up to the house where Morgan and Dwayne are hiding. She turns the doorknob, because somewhere deep in whatever's left of her, she remembers this was home. Morgan can't bring himself to shoot her. He looks at her through the scope of a rifle, and he just can't do it. That detail, that tiny moment, tells you everything you need to know about what this show is going to be about. It's not about killing monsters. It's about what it costs you. Rick gives Morgan a walkie-talkie and tells him to turn it on every morning at dawn. He promises to make contact once he finds his family. Then Rick heads to Atlanta. That's where the refugee center was supposed to be. That's where Lori and Carl would have gone. Now, something important that gets established pretty early on. In the world of The Walking Dead, nobody ever says the word zombie. Not once in 177 episodes. They call them walkers. Other groups later in the show have different names for them. Biters, roamers, lurkers. The Whisperers, who we'll get to much later, call them guardians, but never zombies. The idea is that in this universe, zombie fiction doesn't exist. George Romero never made his movies. There's no cultural reference point for what's happening. These people are encountering reanimated corpses for the first time, with no framework for understanding it. Rick drives toward Atlanta, and when he gets close, he realizes something terrible. The city is completely overrun. The streets are packed with walkers, thousands of them, tens of thousands. He barely makes it out, alive, trapped under a tank at one point, surrounded on all sides. And then a voice crackles over the tank's radio. "Hey you, dumbass. Yeah, you in the tank. Cozy in there?" That voice belongs to Glenn Rhee. Glenn is a former pizza delivery guy, young, smart, quick on his feet. He knows Atlanta's streets better than anyone because he used to navigate them for a living. He guides Rick out of the city and back to a small group of survivors camped in a quarry just outside Atlanta. And at that camp, Rick finds Laurie. He finds Carl. They're alive. His family is alive. But there's a complication, and it's one that defines the first 2 seasons of the show. While Rick was in his coma, Laurie and Shane started a relationship. Both of them genuinely believed Rick was dead. Shane had gone to the hospital. He'd tried to get Rick out, and the hallways were full of soldiers shooting people. Shane listened for a heartbeat and didn't hear one. The power was out, the monitors were dead. He did the best he could. He blocked Rick's door with a gurney to keep the walkers out, and he left. He took Laurie and Carl and kept them alive. He did the right thing, and somewhere along the way, in the grief and the terror and the desperate need for human connection, he and Laurie fell into each other. And now Rick is back, and nobody knows what to say. The group at the quarry is small but important. You've got Daryl Dixon, a rough crossbow-wielding redneck with a chip on his shoulder the size of Georgia. His older brother Merle is there too, and Merle is, to put it kindly, a piece of work. Loud, racist, aggressive, and strung out on drugs. On one of the supply runs into Atlanta, Merle gets so out of control that another group member, T-Dog, handcuffs him to a pipe on a rooftop. And then things go sideways, and they have to leave in a hurry, and Merle gets left behind on that roof. That decision echoes through the show for a long time. You've got Dale, an older man with a fishing hat and an RV, who serves as the group's moral compass. Dale always tries to do the right thing, even when the right thing is complicated. He's one of those people who still believes in civilization, even when civilization has clearly ended. There's Andrea, a civil rights attorney before the world ended, and her younger sister, Amy. Carol, a quiet, abused woman, married to a violent man named Ed. Their daughter Sophia is sweet and shy and always a little scared. Glenn, who I already mentioned. T-Dog, Jim, Jarkey, a handful of others whose names you might not remember, but whose deaths you'll feel. One night, the camp is attacked by a group of walkers that wander in from the woods. It happens fast and it's chaos. Amy is killed, Ed is killed, several others die. It's the first time the group realizes that nowhere is safe. You can set up camp, you can post lookouts, you can build fires, and the dead will still find you. It's the first real lesson of the apocalypse, and it's a hard one. After the attack, Rick makes a decision. There's a place that might still have answers. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is in Atlanta. If anyone is still working on a cure, or at least trying to understand what happened, it would be there. So the group loads up and heads to the CDC. When they arrive, the building looks abandoned. The doors are sealed. They're about to give up when the front entrance suddenly opens, flooding them with light. Inside, they find one man, Dr. Edwin Jenner. He's the last scientist alive in the building. Everyone else either fled or killed themselves. Jenner has been alone for weeks, running experiments on brain tissue samples, trying to understand the reanimation process. Jenner lets them in, and for one brief, beautiful night, the group gets to be normal again. They take hot showers. They eat real food. They drink wine. They laugh. It's the first time we see these people smile, and there's something so bittersweet about it, because you know it can't last. The next morning, Jenner shows them something. He plays a video of a brain scan. It shows the human brain dying, going dark, and then, after a period of time, partially restarting. The brainstem flickers back to life. Basic motor functions return, but the parts of the brain that make you who you are, the memories, the personality, the consciousness, those stay dark. Whatever comes back, it's not the person. It's just the body, running on the most primitive impulses. Hunger, movement, nothing else. And then Jenner drops the real bombshell. He tells Rick something quietly, privately, a whisper that we don't hear. We find out what it was later. Everyone is already infected. The virus, or whatever it is in everyone. It doesn't matter if you get bitten. If you die, for any reason, you come back as a walker. A bite doesn't infect you with the virus. The bite just kills you, through fever and sepsis and organ failure. And then the virus that's already in you does the rest. This changes everything. And Rick carries the weight of that secret for a long time before telling the group. The CDC turns out to have one more surprise. The building is running on emergency generators, and the fuel is almost gone. When it runs out, the facility is programmed to self-destruct. A total decontamination protocol. Jenna has known this the whole time. He's been waiting to die. He locks the group inside and tells them it will be quick, painless. Better than what's waiting for them outside. Rick pleads with him. Some of the group panics. Eventually, Jenna relents and opens the doors. But not everyone leaves. Jackie chooses to stay. She's tired. She's lost too much. And Jenna stays with her. Andrea almost stays too, consumed by grief over Amy's death, but Dale physically refuses to leave without her. He sits down next to her and says, if she's staying, he's staying. It's emotional blackmail, and he knows it, but it works. Andrea leaves with him. The building explodes behind them as they drive away. And that's the end of Season 1. Just 6 episodes. 6, which I still find remarkable. The entire first season of what became the biggest show on cable television is only 6 episodes long, and yet it covers so much ground. It introduces the world, the rules, the key characters, and the fundamental tension that drives the whole show. It's tight, it's focused, it's beautifully directed, and honestly, if the show had ended right there, with that group driving away from the burning CDC into an uncertain future, it would have been a pretty satisfying short series. But of course it didn't end there, not even close. They had 171 more episodes to go, and things were about to get a lot more complicated. If you're settling in, maybe adjusting your pillow, that's good. We're just getting started. Take your time, there's no rush. We've got all night. So the group leaves the CDC and heads south. The plan, loosely, is to make their way to Fort Benning, a military base that might still be operational, might still have soldiers, supplies, structure. It's a hope more than a plan, really. At this point, hope is about all they have. They're driving along a highway, a big multi-lane stretch of road, when they hit a gridlock. Hundreds of abandoned cars just sitting there in the lanes, doors hanging open, luggage scattered. Some of the cars still have bodies in them. It's one of those images that tells you the whole story of the apocalypse without a single word of dialogue. All these people were trying to leave the city. They got stuck, and then the walkers came. The group stops to scavenge. There's useful stuff in these cars. Water, clothes, tools, gas. Dale's RV is overheating anyway, so they might as well make the best of it. And then Sophia, Carol's 12-year-old daughter, spots a herd of walkers coming down the highway. Dozens of them, moving slowly, like a river of the dead. Everyone ducks under the cars and stays quiet, waiting for them to pass. But Sophia gets spotted. 2 walkers break off from the herd and chase her into the woods. Rick goes after her. He finds the walkers, kills them, and tells Sophia to hide by a creek while he leads the remaining danger away. When he comes back, she's gone. She just vanished into the woods. A scared 12-year-old girl, alone in a forest full of the dead. The search for Sophia becomes the central thread of the entire second season. Day after day, the group sends out search parties. They comb the woods, check farmhouses, leave supplies at intersections hoping she'll find them. Carol prays. Daryl, of all people, becomes the most dedicated searcher. He nearly dies looking for her, falling down a ravine and impaling himself on one of his own crossbow bolts. He hallucinates his brother Merle mocking him, telling him nobody cares about him, telling him Sophia is already dead. Daryl gets up anyway and keeps looking. That's when you start to see who Daryl really is underneath all the rough edges. He cares. He cares more than he'll ever admit. While all this is happening, something else happens that changes the trajectory of the season. Carl gets shot. The group is out in the woods, and Carl is with Rick and Shane, and a deer appears in a clearing. Carl approaches it, this beautiful, innocent moment, a kid seeing a deer in the wild. And then a gunshot rings out. A hunter named Otis, on the other side of the clearing, was aiming at the deer and didn't see Carl standing behind it. The bullet passes through the deer and hits Carl in the abdomen. Rick carries Carl, running through the fields, and Otis leads them to a farmhouse. This is Herschel Green's farm, and this is where the group is going to stay for a while. Herschel is an older man, a veterinarian by trade, deeply religious and quietly strong. He's been riding out the apocalypse on his family's farm with his 2 daughters, Maggie and Beth, and a small collection of family and friends. The farm feels like a different world. It's green, peaceful, untouched by the chaos outside. There are fields and a barn and a farmhouse with a porch where you can sit and watch the sunset. After everything the group has been through, the farm feels like paradise. Herschel operates on Carl and saves his life, but he needs surgical supplies. Shane and Otis make a run to a nearby high school that was set up as a FEMA shelter. The school is overrun with walkers. During the escape, Shane makes a choice that defines his character for the rest of his time on the show. He shoots Otis in the leg and leaves him as bait for the walkers. Otis screams as the dead swarm him, and Shane runs. He gets the supplies. Carl lives. Nobody knows what Shane did. He tells the group that Otis sacrificed himself, that he was heroic in his final moments. But Shane's hands are shaking. He goes into the bathroom and shaves his head, staring at himself in the mirror with this dead-eyed expression. You can see the last pieces of Shane's humanity starting to crack. He's still telling himself that what he did was necessary, that it was survival, that anyone would have done the same thing. But somewhere deep down, he knows he crossed a line, and you can see it eating him alive. The Shane situation gets worse from here. He's still in love with Laurie. He still believes Rick is too soft to lead. Rick wants to negotiate, to build consensus, to find the moral path. Shane thinks morality is a luxury they can no longer afford. He thinks the old rules don't apply anymore, and that the people who survive will be the ones willing to do whatever it takes, no matter how ugly. In a lot of ways, Shane isn't wrong. The world of The Walking Dead will prove his philosophy right over and over again. But the way Shane goes about it, the rage, the jealousy, the manipulation, that's what makes him dangerous. Laurie finds out she's pregnant, and she doesn't know who the father is, Rick or Shane. She takes a pregnancy test in secret, and when Glenn finds out, she swears him to secrecy. Eventually everyone knows. The pregnancy becomes this unspoken tension hanging over the group. A baby in the apocalypse. How do you feed it? How do you keep it quiet when a crying infant is essentially a dinner bell for every walker within earshot? How do you bring a child into a world like this? Meanwhile, Glenn falls in love with Maggie Green, Herschel's older daughter. Maggie is smart, tough, practical, and she doesn't suffer fools. She and Glenn start with a physical relationship, born out of the sheer intensity of living in a world where you might die tomorrow, and it grows into something deeper, something real. Glenn and Maggie become one of the great love stories of the show, and their relationship endures through things that would destroy most people. But we'll get to all of that later. Now, here's where the second season delivers one of its biggest gut punches. Glenn discovers something while exploring the barn on Herschel's property. The barn is full of walkers, dozens of them. Herschel has been collecting them, keeping them locked inside, feeding them chickens. His wife, his neighbours, people from the community. Herschel believes they're still people. He believes they're sick, not dead, and that one day a cure will be found and they'll come back. He can't accept that the people he loved are gone. The barn is Herschel's grief given physical form. When the rest of the group finds out, the reaction is divided. Rick wants to handle it diplomatically. Herschel has been generous enough to let them stay on his land, and Rick doesn't want to push him. Shane, predictably, loses his mind. He sees the barn full of walkers as an active threat, and he's not wrong about that part. If those doors fail, if the chains break, everyone on the farm is dead. Shane reaches his breaking point. He goes to the barn, breaks the locks, and throws the doors open. The walkers stumble out one by one into the daylight, and the group opens fire. Herschel watches in horror as the people he's been trying to protect are gunned down in his front yard. His wife, his friends, his neighbours, one by one they fall. And then the gunfire stops, and the barn goes quiet, and one more walker shuffles out. It's Sophia. Carol screams. Daryl grabs her, holds her back. Nobody can move. This little girl they've been searching for, day after day, risking their lives, holding on to hope. She's been in the barn the whole time. She was bitten in the woods and died and turned, and someone found her wandering and put her in the barn, and nobody knew. Herschel didn't know. He didn't know what she looked like. He was just keeping the dead, all the dead, because he couldn't let go. Rick steps forward. Everyone is frozen. Carol is sobbing, and Rick raises his gun and puts Sophia down. I still think that's one of the most devastating moments in the entire series, maybe in all of television, because it's not just a character dying, it's the death of hope itself. The group spent the entire first half of the season looking for this girl, and her death retroactively makes all of that searching pointless. Every step Daryl took through those woods, every argument about whether to keep looking or give up, all of it was already over before it started. She was dead the whole time, and the way the show reveals it, with that long, silent walk out of the barn, is just masterful storytelling. No music, no dramatic cuts, just that slow shuffling walk and the dawning realization on everyone's faces. After the barn, everything accelerates. Herschel, shattered by what happened, goes to a bar in town and starts drinking. Rick and Glenn find him there and try to bring him back. A confrontation with strangers at the bar turns violent, and Rick kills 2 men. It's the first time Rick kills living people, and it changes something in him. He does it to protect Glenn and Herschel, but you can see the weight of it settling on him. Shane's descent continues. He becomes increasingly paranoid, aggressive, isolated. He and Rick have confrontations that stop just short of violence. Shane is convinced that he would be a better leader, a better father to Carl, a better partner to Laurie. He's deluded himself into believing that Rick stole his life, when in reality, Rick's life was stolen by a bullet and a coma and a world that ended while he was asleep. Dale, the moral compass, tries to warn the group about Shane. He sees what Shane is becoming. He tells Andrea, he tells Laurie, he tells Rick. Nobody listens. And then Dale is killed by a walker that guts him in a field. Herschel tries to save him, but the wound is too severe. Daryl puts Dale out of his misery with a bullet. The group loses its conscience. The voice that always asked, "But is this right?" is gone. Shane finally snaps completely. He lures Rick into the woods under the pretense of tracking a prisoner who escaped. In reality, Shane is planning to kill Rick. He's got a gun. He's made his decision. The 2 of them stand in a moonlit field, and Shane raises his weapon. Rick sees what's happening. He's known it was coming, maybe for a while, and Rick begs Shane to stop. He tells him they can work this out. He tells him it doesn't have to end this way, but it does. Rick stabs Shane in the chest with a knife. Shane dies in Rick's arms, his best friend, the man who saved his family when Rick couldn't, the man who kept Laurie and Carl alive while Rick was in a coma, and Rick is the one who has to kill him. And then Shane gets back up, because everyone is infected. This is the moment Rick understands what Jenna whispered to him at the CDC. It doesn't matter how you die, you come back. Shane reanimates right there in the field, and Carl, who has followed his father into the woods, shoots the walker that used to be Shane. A 12-year-old boy shoots his father's best friend in the head. And afterward, Carl doesn't cry, he just stares. Something in Carl started to change that night, and it kept changing for the rest of his life. The gunshot attracts a massive herd of walkers. They swarm the farm from every direction. The group fights, but there are too many. The barn catches fire, or maybe they set it on fire, I honestly don't remember exactly. But the barn burns, and the farm is overrun. People die. Patricia, Jimmy. The group scatters in all directions, driving and running into the night. They regroup on the highway where they first lost Sophia. Rick tells them the truth that he's been carrying. He tells them what Jenna whispered at the CDC. Everyone is infected. No matter how you die, you come back. The group is horrified. They feel betrayed. Rick has been keeping this secret for weeks, months. He says he was trying to protect them. Nobody buys it. And then Rick says something that signals the end of the man he used to be and the beginning of someone new. The group is challenging him, questioning his leadership, arguing among themselves. And Rick snaps. He tells them that if they think they can do better on their own, they're welcome to leave. But if they stay, it's not a democracy anymore. Rick is in charge. Full stop. One more thing happens in the season 2 finale that we need to talk about. Andrea got separated from the group during the evacuation of the farm. She's alone in the woods, exhausted, out of ammunition, being chased by walkers. She fights them off as long as she can, but she's about to be overwhelmed. And then a figure appears, a hooded figure, cloaked, carrying a katana sword. Behind this figure, chained and walking, are 2 walkers. Their jaws have been removed, their arms cut off. They're docile, harmless. They serve as a kind of camouflage, a way to move through the dead without being noticed. This is Michonne, and when she shows up, the whole show is about to level up. We're done with the farm. We're done with Shane. We're done with the world being even a little bit recognizable. From here on out, The Walking Dead becomes something darker, something harder, something that asks much bigger questions about what people are willing to do to survive. The stakes are about to go way up. But for now, take a breath. That was a lot. The group is out on the road again, heading into an uncertain future with a new leader who just told them democracy is dead. They've lost their farm, they've lost their innocence, and they've lost any illusion that the old world is coming back. The new world is here, and it's not kind. Let's keep going. There's a prison waiting for them just up the road, and behind its walls, a whole new chapter of this story is about to begin. When Season 3 opens, several months have passed. We don't see those months. The show just jumps forward, and you can tell immediately that things have been hard. The group has been surviving on the road through a brutal winter. They're leaner, tougher, more coordinated. They move through a house like a military unit now, clearing rooms without speaking, communicating in hand signals. Carl, who is maybe 13 at this point, carries a gun with a silencer and moves with the group. He's not a kid anymore. Not really. Laurie is heavily pregnant and barely able to keep up. They find a prison, a large state correctional facility surrounded by double fences and guard towers. It's full of walkers because of course it is, everything is full of walkers, but the fences are intact. The walls are solid. If they can clear the dead out of it, they'll have a fortress. So they do. It takes time and it's dangerous and people nearly die, but they do it. They clear the yards, the cell blocks, the corridors, and for the first time since the farm, the group has a home. The prison becomes the centre of the show for 2 seasons, and there's something poetic about it. A place designed to keep people locked in becomes the safest place in the world. The cell blocks become bedrooms. The cafeteria becomes a mess hall. The fenced yards become gardens. They grow crops. They raise pigs. They set up a council to make decisions. It's the closest thing to civilization any of them have experienced since everything fell apart. But the prison has surprises. While clearing the lower levels, the group encounters a small group of surviving inmates who have been locked in the cafeteria since the outbreak began. They've been living on canned food and had no idea what happened to the outside world. Some of these inmates are absorbed into the group. Others become problems. One of them, a man named Andrew, tries to sabotage the prison by leading walkers inside. He nearly kills several people before Rick catches and kills him. And then there's Herschel. During the clearing of the prison, Herschel is bitten on the lower leg by a walker. Rick doesn't hesitate. He grabs a hatchet and amputates Herschel's leg right there on the ground, cutting through bone and muscle while Herschel screams. It's brutal and desperate, and it works. Herschel survives the bite because the infection didn't have time to spread. He spends the rest of his life on crutches and later gets a prosthetic leg, and he becomes this symbol of resilience, this quiet, steady presence who keeps everyone grounded. Now, Laurie. We need to talk about Laurie. Her pregnancy has been a source of tension all season. She knows the baby could be Shane's. She knows bringing a child into this world is arguably cruel. She and Rick have barely spoken since he told the group about the infection. Their marriage, which was already strained before the apocalypse, has essentially collapsed under the weight of Shane's death and Laurie's guilt and Rick's transformation into someone harder than the man she married. When Laurie goes into labour, things go wrong immediately. She's not in the infirmary. She's in a corridor deep in the prison during a walker attack, with only Maggie and Carl by her side. The baby is in distress. Laurie is hemorrhaging. Maggie realises there's only one option: an emergency C-section, right there on the floor, with no anaesthesia and no real surgical tools. Laurie knows she's not going to survive this. She looks at Carl, her son, and she tells him to be strong. She tells him to take care of his father, to take care of the baby. She tells him she loves him, and Maggie cuts her open, and the baby is born alive and screaming, and Laurie dies on the concrete floor of a prison corridor while her son watches. Carl then raises his gun and shoots his mother in the head to prevent her from reanimating. He's 13 years old. When Rick finds out, he doesn't speak. He doesn't yell. Andrew Lincoln, the actor, delivers one of the most raw, haunting performances I've ever seen. Rick just crumbles. His legs go out from under him. He drops to the ground and makes this sound that isn't crying exactly. It's more like something breaking, something fundamental coming apart inside him. He doesn't hold the baby. He can barely look at it. For days afterward, Rick wanders the lower levels of the prison alone. killing walkers in a daze. He starts hallucinating. He hears a phone ringing and picks it up, and has conversations with people who are dead. He talks to Amy. He talks to Jim. He talks to Laurie. He's having a complete psychological breakdown, and nobody can reach him. Eventually, Rick comes back to himself. He holds his daughter for the first time. They name her Judith, and Rick becomes a father again, slowly, painfully. But the grief never fully leaves him. You can see it in his eyes for the rest of the series. That moment in the prison corridor took something from Rick that he never got back. While all of this has been happening at the prison, there's another storyline developing that introduces the show's first truly great villain. Michonne, the woman with the katana who saved Andrea at the end of season 2, has been travelling with Andrea for months. They're exhausted, starving, and Andrea is sick. They stumble upon a town called Woodbury. Woodbury is remarkable. It's a small town in Georgia that has been fortified and organised into a functioning community. There are walls, guards, electricity, running water, a little main street with shops and a medical clinic. People walk around during the day like it's normal life, like the apocalypse is just something happening somewhere else. Woodbury is run by a man who calls himself the Governor. His real name is Philip Blake, but everyone just calls him the Governor. On the surface, he's charming, articulate, reassuring. He welcomes Andrea and Michonne with open arms. He gives them beds and food and medicine. He seems like exactly the leader the world needs. Michonne doesn't trust him for a second. There's something wrong, and she can feel it. The walls are too well guarded. The soldiers are too well armed. People in Woodbury seem a little too content, a little too willing not to ask questions. Michonne wants to leave immediately, but Andrea is drawn in by the normalcy, by the promise of safety, by the Governor's charm. And Michonne is right to be suspicious. Behind closed doors, the Governor is a monster. He keeps a collection of severed walker heads in fish tanks in his apartment, lined up on shelves like trophies. He has his zombified daughter, Penny, chained in a room. He feeds her, brushes her hair, talks to her like she's still alive. He's also brutally violent toward anyone who threatens his control. He sends teams out to scavenge, and when those teams encounter other groups of survivors, the Governor doesn't negotiate. He kills them and takes their supplies. He's building an army, and here's where things connect. The Governor's right-hand man, his top enforcer, is Merle Dixon. Daryl's brother, Merle, the one who was left handcuffed on a rooftop in Atlanta way back in season 1. He survived. He cut off his own hand to escape, cauterized the stump, and eventually found his way to Woodbury. Now he has a metal prosthetic with a blade attachment where his hand used to be, and he serves the Governor with violent, dog-like loyalty. The conflict between the prison group and Woodbury builds slowly and then erupts. Glenn and Maggie are captured by Merle while on a supply run. They're brought to Woodbury. Glenn is beaten. Maggie is threatened with sexual assault by the Governor, who forces her to remove her shirt while he looms over her. It's one of the most uncomfortable scenes the show ever produced, and it's meant to be. The Governor is testing Maggie's limits, trying to break her to get information about the prison. Rick leads a rescue mission to Woodbury. During the raid, Michonne finds the Governor's apartment, discovers his collection of heads and his zombie daughter, and kills Penny. The Governor walks in and finds Michonne standing over his daughter's body. They fight violently, and Michonne stabs him in the eye with a shard of glass. The Governor survives but loses the eye, and from that point forward, he wears an eye patch and his hatred for the prison group becomes absolute. Daryl and Merle are reunited during the Woodbury conflict, and it's complicated. Daryl loves his brother, but Merle is toxic. Merle is everything Daryl has been trying to grow past. They leave Woodbury together, but eventually Merle makes a choice. He tries to assassinate the Governor on his own, to protect Daryl and the prison group, and the Governor kills him. Daryl finds Merle reanimated as a walker and has to put him down. It's another one of those moments that breaks you. Daryl, who has spent his whole life following Merle, being bullied by Merle, loving Merle despite everything, finally has to say goodbye, and he does it with a knife to the brain. Andrea, who has been in Woodbury this whole time, trying to play peacemaker between the Governor and the prison, finally sees the Governor for what he truly is. But it's too late. He captures her, ties her to a chair in a room with a walker, and leaves her to die. She frees herself, but not before being bitten. When Rick's group finds her, she's already dying. Michonne stays with her as she takes her own life with a gun. Andrea's death felt like a waste to a lot of viewers, myself included. The comics version of Andrea is one of the strongest characters in the entire series, and the show never quite figured out what to do with her. The governor's first attack on the prison fails. He retreats to Woodbury, gathers his soldiers, tells them the prison group is dangerous, and orders a second assault. But his own people have seen too much. They refuse to fight. The governor, in a moment of pure psychotic rage, guns down his own soldiers. Dozens of them. Just opens fire on men and women who trusted him. Only a few survive and flee. The governor drives off with his 2 remaining loyalists. Season 3 ends with the prison group absorbing the survivors of Woodbury. Old people, children, families. The prison population swells. They start building something real. Season 4 opens with a time jump of several months. The prison is thriving. They have a council now, a sort of governing body. Rick has stepped back from leadership and is farming. Literally farming. He's growing tomatoes and teaching Carl about agriculture. He's trying to find peace, trying to reclaim some piece of the man he used to be before the world broke him. But peace doesn't last in this world. A flu-like illness sweeps through the prison. People get sick fast and die fast, and then they reanimate inside the walls. The internal threat is almost worse than the external one. Glenn gets deathly ill. Several people die overnight. The group races to find antibiotics at a nearby veterinary college, and they manage to get the medicine in time, but the cost is high. And then the governor comes back. He's been wandering alone since the massacre of his soldiers. He finds a family, a man named Martinez and a few others, and he slowly insinuates himself into their group. He charms them. He helps them. He becomes their leader. And then he starts to rebuild his army, because that's what the governor does. He takes, he controls, he destroys. The governor captures Michonne and Herschel. He brings them to the prison fence and demands that Rick hand over the prison. He has a tank. He has soldiers. He has hostages. Rick stands at the fence and tries to reason with him. Rick gives one of the most important speeches of the show. He says they can all live together. There's room. They can find a way. The prison is big enough for everyone. The governor holds Michonne's katana to Herschel's neck and tells Rick that he's wrong. And then while Rick is still talking, still trying to find the peaceful solution, the governor swings the sword and takes Herschel's head off. Herschel Green, who survived a walker bite, who learned to walk on one leg, who became the heart and soul of the prison community, dies on his knees in front of everyone he cared about. Rick screams. Maggie screams. Beth screams. And then the shooting starts. The battle for the prison is total chaos. The governor's forces breach the fences. The tank destroys the walls. Walkers pour in through the gaps. The group is overwhelmed. The prison, their home, the place they fought so hard to build, falls. In the aftermath of the battle, Rick and the governor fight hand to hand. The governor nearly kills Rick, choking the life out of him, but Michonne runs him through from behind with her sword. The governor lies dying on the ground, and Lily, a woman he'd been travelling with whose daughter was killed by a walker, finishes him off with a bullet. The prison is destroyed. The group scatters in every direction. For the first time since season 1, everyone is separated. Rick and Carl are alone. Michonne is alone. Daryl is paired with Beth. Maggie is with Sasha and Bob. Glenn wakes up on the destroyed prison walkway by himself, surrounded by walkers. Tyrese is carrying baby Judith, along with Lizzie and Mika, 2 young sisters. The second half of season 4 follows these scattered groups as they try to survive and find each other. It's some of the most character-driven storytelling in the show. Daryl and Beth bond in ways neither of them expected, sharing quiet moments in funeral homes and moonshine shacks. Beth forces Daryl to confront his past, his abusive father, his feelings of worthlessness. She tells him that he has to put that away, that the person he was before doesn't have to be the person he is now. It's beautiful, and it's heartbreaking, because Beth is kidnapped by a car with a white cross on the back, and Daryl can't stop it. Rick and Carl have one of the most intense father-son arcs in the show. Carl is furious with Rick. He blames him for the prison falling, for not being strong enough, for always trying to be the good guy in a world that punishes good guys. Rick is badly injured and barely conscious for much of their time together. Carl has to keep them both alive, and he resents it, and he also discovers that he's capable of more than he knew. Their relationship is tested to the breaking point and slowly, painfully, starts to heal. Tyrese's group takes a dark turn. Lizzie, one of the young sisters, has been showing disturbing behaviour. She doesn't understand that walkers are dangerous. She thinks they're just different, that they're still people. She feeds rats to the walkers at the fence. She names them. She talks to them. And one afternoon, while Tyrese and Carol are away, Lizzie kills her own sister Mika, stabs her to death. She stands over the body, covered in blood, and calmly tells Carol that it's okay. Mika will come back. She just has to wait. Carol realizes that Lizzie is a danger to everyone, including baby Judith. In one of the most haunting scenes in the series, Carol takes Lizzie into a field, tells her to look at the flowers, and shoots her in the back of the head. "Just look at the flowers, Lizzie." That line became one of the most quoted and most devastating moments in the show's history. Eventually, all of the scattered groups start to converge on the same place. There are signs along the railroad tracks, painted signs. They say sanctuary for all, community for all. Those who arrive, survive. They point toward a place called Terminus. One by one, each group sees the signs and follows them. Glenn finds Maggie. Daryl falls in with a group of violent men called the Claimers. Rick, Carl, and Michonne encounter the Claimers on the road. The Claimers leader, Joe, recognizes Rick from a previous encounter and decides to kill him. One of the Claimers pins Carl to the ground and threatens to assault him. Rick, with his hands bound, watches his son being held down by a stranger, and something inside him detonates. He lunges forward and bites Joe's throat out, just tears it open with his teeth. In the shocked silence that follows, Michonne and Daryl overpower the remaining Claimers, and Rick stabs the man who threatened Carl over and over and over again. It's the most savage thing Rick has ever done, and he doesn't regret it, not for a second. That moment tells you exactly where Rick Grimes is now. He is a man who will do anything, literally anything, to protect his family. The old Rick, the sheriff's deputy, the man who believed in law and order, that man is gone. This Rick is something else entirely. They arrive at Terminus. It looks good at first. There's a woman grilling meat on a barbecue. There are flowers in the yard. The people seem friendly, but Rick notices things. He notices that the people of Terminus are wearing clothes and jewelry that belong to other people. People from his group, Glenn's watch, Maggie's poncho, a backpack he recognizes. Rick pulls a gun. Everything goes sideways. Terminus soldiers herd the group into a boxcar. Inside, they find Glenn, Maggie, Sasha, Bob, and the others. They've been captured too. Rick is locked in a dark train car with his people around him. They're prisoners. The people of Terminus are cannibals. They've been luring survivors in with those signs along the tracks, trapping them and eating them. The last line of Season 4 is Rick, standing in the darkness of that boxcar, looking at his friends and saying, "They're screwing with the wrong people." And honestly, he's right. The people of Terminus have no idea what they've locked up in that train car. They've captured a group of people who have survived everything the apocalypse has thrown at them. People who have fought walkers and murderers and starvation and each other. People who have lost everything and kept going anyway. Terminus thinks they're predators. They're about to find out their prey. We're about a third of the way through the story now. If you're still awake, we're just getting to the good stuff. And if you're starting to drift off, that's perfectly fine too. I'll keep talking. The story will be here whenever you come back to it. Season 5 opens with the group still locked inside that boxcar at Terminus, and right away, you can tell they're not planning to sit around and wait to be rescued. They're making weapons, sharpening belt buckles into blades, pulling wooden planks from the walls. These people have been through too much to just give up. They're going to fight their way out, or die trying. The people of Terminus pull Rick, Daryl, Glenn, and Bob out of the boxcar and bring them to a room that can only be described as a slaughterhouse. Literally, there are stainless steel troughs, there are people in plastic aprons, and there are baseball bats. Terminus lines people up over the troughs, hits them in the head with a bat to stun them, and then cuts their throats. They're processing human beings like livestock. Rick and the others are kneeling over the trough about to be killed, and Glenn is right there at the front of the line. The bat comes up, and then from outside, there's a massive explosion. Carol saved them. Carol, who wasn't with the group when they were captured, has been tracking them. She found Terminus on her own, assessed the situation, and came up with a plan. She smears herself in walker guts to blend in with the herd, then detonates a propane tank near the fence. The explosion tears a hole in the perimeter, and walkers flood into Terminus by the hundreds. In the chaos, Rick and the others break free, grab weapons, and fight their way out. The group escapes into the woods and reunites with Carol. When Rick sees her, he hugs her, which might not sound like a big deal, but it is. The last time Rick saw Carol, he had banished her from the group for killing 2 sick people at the prison to prevent the flu from spreading. That was a controversial decision at the time, and it caused a rift. But now, after she single-handedly destroyed Terminus and saved all of their lives, Rick welcomes her back without hesitation. And Daryl, who has always had a deep, complicated bond with Carol, holds her like she's the only person in the world. There's also an incredible reunion here. Tyrese has been protecting baby Judith this whole time, along with Carol, and when Rick and Carl see Judith alive, the emotion is overwhelming. Rick thought his daughter was dead. He'd been carrying that grief for weeks. And here she is, alive and safe, and reaching for him. The group moves on, but Terminus isn't done with them. Gareth, the leader of Terminus, survived the assault and regrouped with a handful of his people. They track Rick's group to a church where the group has taken shelter with a priest named Father Gabriel Stokes. Gabriel is an interesting character. Before the apocalypse, he was the pastor of this church. When the outbreak hit, his congregation came to the church seeking refuge. Gabriel locked the doors and wouldn't let them in. He sat inside and listened to them scream as the walkers killed them outside. He's been living alone in the church ever since, consumed by guilt, unable to face what he did. The fact that a man of God failed so fundamentally when his flock needed him most is one of the show's most pointed commentaries on faith and survival. Gareth's group ambushes Bob outside the church. They knock him out, and when Bob wakes up, he's sitting around a campfire with the Terminus survivors. Gareth is talking casually, almost cheerfully, and then Bob looks down and realizes they've amputated his left leg. They're eating it right in front of him. Gareth is literally chewing on a piece of Bob's leg while making polite conversation. But Bob starts laughing. He's laughing and crying, and he pulls up his pant leg to show them a bite mark. He was bitten by a walker at the food bank earlier. He's already infected. "Tainted meat," he screams. "You're eating tainted meat." The look of horror on Gareth's face is, I have to say, pretty satisfying. Bob doesn't survive. The bite kills him. Sasha is with him at the end, and Tyrese puts a knife through his skull to prevent reanimation. But before Bob's death, Rick deals with the Terminus situation definitively. He and the group ambush Gareth and his people inside the church and kill them. Not in a fight, in an execution. Rick promised Gareth back at Terminus that he would kill him with a red-handled machete. And that's exactly what he does. It's cold and it's brutal, and Father Gabriel watches in horror and says, "This is the Lord's house." And Maggie looks at him and says, "No, it's just 4 walls and a roof." That line says everything about where these characters are now. The old world symbols don't mean anything anymore. A church is just a building. A priest is just a man who locked the door. Justice is whatever the people with weapons decide it is. Now, running parallel to all of this, there's another storyline involving Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene. Abraham is a former army sergeant, big, red-haired, intense. Rosita is smart and capable and becomes one of the show's most reliable characters over time. And Eugene is, well, Eugene is Eugene. He's a mullet-wearing, awkward, socially stunted man who claims to be a scientist who knows what caused the outbreak and can create a cure if they can just get him to Washington, D.C. Abraham has built his entire purpose around getting Eugene to Washington. It's the only thing keeping him alive. He lost his family before the apocalypse, not to walkers but to his own violence, and he was about to kill himself when Eugene found him and gave him a mission. "Get me to Washington. I can save the world." Abraham poured every ounce of his grief and his need for meaning into that mission. And then Eugene confesses he's not a scientist. He doesn't know what caused the outbreak. He can't cure anything. He lied. He made the whole thing up because he's a coward who knew he couldn't survive alone. And the only way to ensure that stronger people would protect him was to make himself seem indispensable. Eugene is a con man whose only real skill is manipulation through perceived value. Abraham beats Eugene nearly to death when he finds out, and then Abraham breaks down, because without the mission, without the purpose, he has nothing. He's just a man standing in the middle of nowhere with no reason to keep going. It takes him a while to find a new reason, but he does, eventually. Meanwhile, Beth Green, Herschel's younger daughter, who was kidnapped in that car with the White Cross back in season 4. She's alive, and she's being held at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Grady is run by a group of police officers led by a woman named Dawn Lerner. On the surface, Grady functions like a medical facility. They rescue people, treat their injuries, and in return, those people work off their debt. But it's essentially indentured servitude. The officers exploit the patients. Some of them are abusive. Dawn maintains control through a combination of denial and force, telling herself and everyone else that they're doing good work, that the outside world will be restored soon, that they just need to hold on. Beth is trapped there, but she doesn't stop fighting. She befriends another patient named Noah, and they attempt to escape. Noah makes it out. Beth doesn't. She's caught and punished. Rick's group learns where Beth is and mounts a rescue. They capture 2 of Dawn's officers and arrange a prisoner exchange. The swap is supposed to be simple. Rick's people hand over the officers, Dawn hands over Beth and another patient. And for a moment, it seems like it's going to work. Everyone is tense but cooperative. The exchange happens on a hallway inside the hospital, and then Dawn pushes her luck. She demands Noah as well, claiming he's still owed to Grady. Noah agrees to go back, because that's who Noah is, selfless to a fault. But Beth won't accept it. She looks Dawn in the eye, says, "I get it now," and stabs her in the shoulder with a pair of surgical scissors. Dawn's reaction is reflexive. She pulls her gun and shoots Beth in the head. It happens so fast that nobody can process it. Beth is dead before she hits the ground. Daryl immediately shoots Dawn. The hospital officers stand down. It's over. Daryl carries Beth's body out of the hospital. The group is waiting outside. Maggie, who's been racing to get to the hospital, arrives just in time to see Daryl emerge with her sister in his arms. Maggie collapses. The scream she lets out is one of those sounds you don't forget. Beth's death was deeply controversial among fans. A lot of people felt it was pointless, that she was killed for shock value right at the moment she was becoming one of the show's strongest characters. And honestly, I get that criticism. But I also think that's kind of the point. In this world, death doesn't wait for a satisfying narrative arc. It doesn't care about character development. It just happens, suddenly and senselessly, and the people left behind have to figure out how to keep going. The group leaves Atlanta. They've lost Beth. They've lost Bob. Tyrese is bitten during a supply run at Noah's family home and dies despite the group's attempts to save him. They amputate his arm like they did with Herschel's leg, but it's too late. The infection has spread. Tyrese dies in the back of a car, hallucinating visions of the dead, listening to a radio broadcast that may or may not be real. At this point, the group is at their lowest. They're walking along an empty road, out of food, out of water, out of hope. They're dehydrated and exhausted and barely speaking. A storm hits and they shelter in a barn, and that night, a herd of walkers bears down on them. The whole group presses against the barn doors, holding them shut through sheer force of will while the storm rages outside. They hold the doors all night. It's one of the show's most symbolic moments. The storm outside, the dead pushing in, and these broken, exhausted people holding the line together because that's all they can do. And then a man named Aaron finds them. Aaron is a recruiter for a community called the Alexandria Safe Zone, located in Northern Virginia, not far from Washington, D.C. He's clean, well-fed, friendly, and he has pictures. Pictures of a walled community with houses and gardens and solar panels and running water. He says his community is looking for good people, strong people, people who have survived. Rick's group is immediately suspicious. The last time someone offered them sanctuary, it was Terminus, and those people were cannibals. Rick is particularly distrustful. He interrogates Aaron, tests him, even punches him. But Aaron is patient and genuine, and eventually, the group agrees to at least go look. What they find is remarkable. Alexandria is a planned suburban community that was built with its own solar grid and water filtration system. It's surrounded by steel walls, 15 feet high. Inside there are houses with working kitchens and bathrooms, and bedrooms with actual beds. There's a pantry stocked with food. There's a pond. There are children playing in the streets. It looks like the apocalypse never happened. The community is led by Deanna Monroe, a former congresswoman from Ohio. Deanna is intelligent, compassionate, and perhaps fatally optimistic. She interviews each member of Rick's group on camera, asking them about their experiences, their skills, their hopes. She assigns them jobs. Rick and Michonne become constables. Abraham works on construction. Glenn joins the supply run team. The Alexandrians are, to put it bluntly, soft. Most of them have been behind the walls since the very beginning of the outbreak. They've never had to fight. They've never had to kill. They don't understand the world outside their walls, and they don't want to. They leave their gates unlocked. They have parties. They bake casseroles. Rick's group is horrified, not by the comfort, but by the vulnerability. These people are sheep, and sooner or later wolves are going to come. Rick begins to see Alexandria not as a sanctuary, but as something his group needs to take over, for everyone's good. He starts making contingency plans. He hides guns outside the walls. He tells his people to be ready. There's a man in Alexandria named Pete, a doctor who beats his wife, Jessie. Rick confronts Pete, and it escalates into a violent fight that spills into the street. Rick, standing in the middle of the road covered in blood, delivers a speech to the horrified Alexandrians about how their way of life is going to get them killed. He looks unhinged. He looks dangerous. Michonne knocks him out. In the end, Deanna holds a meeting to decide what to do about Rick. But before a decision is made, Pete shows up with a weapon and accidentally kills Deanna's husband, Reg. Deanna, in grief and fury, looks at Rick and says, "Do it!" Rick shoots Pete dead. And at that exact moment, two things happen. Morgan Jones, Rick's friend from the very first episode, appears at the gates of Alexandria. He's been tracking Rick for months, following the signs and the trail. Morgan has transformed since we last saw him. He's calm now, centered, trained in a form of martial arts using a wooden staff. He's become a pacifist who believes all life is precious. He's the opposite of what Rick has become. Morgan arrives just in time to watch Rick execute a man. And the look on his face tells you that the reunion he imagined is not the one he's getting. That's the end of Season 5. The group is in Alexandria. They have walls and houses and running water, but they've also brought their trauma, their violence, and their survival instincts into a community that isn't ready for any of it. The question hanging over everything is whether Rick's people will save Alexandria or destroy it. We're about to find out. But first, let me just say, if you need to shift positions or adjust your blankets or anything like that, go ahead. We're not going anywhere. The story will keep rolling whenever you're comfortable. Season 6 begins with a problem the size of a small city. Rick discovers a rock quarry about a mile from Alexandria that has been functioning as an accidental walker trap. Thousands of walkers have been falling into it over the months and years, piling up down there, held in by trucks blocking the exits. But the barriers are failing, the trucks are shifting, and when they finally give way, that entire herd, thousands upon thousands of walkers, is going to come straight toward Alexandria. Rick devises an ambitious plan. They'll use vehicles, flares, and a coordinated team effort to lead the herd away from Alexandria, along a predetermined route. It's like herding cattle, except the cattle want to eat you. The plan involves walls of metal sheeting along the road, people stationed at key intersections, and a long, careful march to draw the walkers 20 miles in the wrong direction. The plan starts working, and then everything goes wrong at once. While the bulk of Rick's fighters are out managing the herd, a group called the Wolves attacks Alexandria. The Wolves are a cult-like group of people who have gone feral. They carve W's into their foreheads. They don't use guns. They use machetes, axes, knives. They kill for sport. They believe the world belongs to the dead now, and the living are just borrowing time. The Wolves hit Alexandria hard. They come over the walls and start slaughtering people in the streets. The Alexandrians, who have never faced this kind of violence, are paralyzed. People are dying everywhere. And then Carol steps up. Carol, who has been playing the role of a harmless housewife since arriving in Alexandria, baking cookies and making casseroles, reveals who she really is. She puts on a disguise using a dead wolf's poncho and face paint, and she moves through the streets like a ghost, killing wolves one after another with cold efficiency. She saves lives. She protects the armory. She almost single-handedly stops the assault. It's one of Carol's defining moments, and it reinforces what might be the show's biggest lesson. The people who survive in this world are rarely the ones who look the part. Morgan, meanwhile, refuses to kill the wolves. He fights them with his staff, knocking them out instead of killing them. He even captures one and locks him in a basement, trying to rehabilitate him. Carol and Morgan clash over this fundamental disagreement. Carol believes mercy is weakness. Morgan believes all life is precious. Neither of them is entirely right, and neither is entirely wrong, and the show is smart enough not to pick a side. Meanwhile, the noise from the wolf attack, the gunfire and screaming, draws part of the mega herd off its planned route. The walkers turn toward Alexandria. The diversionary plan collapses. Rick races back to Alexandria on foot, fighting through walkers, and barely makes it inside the walls. But the damage is done. The herd surrounds Alexandria, thousands of walkers pressing against the walls from every direction. The community is under siege. They can't leave. They can't fight. All they can do is wait and hope the walls hold. They don't hold. The wall collapses. Walkers flood into Alexandria. In the chaos that follows, multiple characters die. Deanna is bitten and chooses to go out fighting, emptying her gun into the oncoming herd. Jessie, the woman Rick had begun a relationship with, is killed by walkers while holding onto Carl's hand. Rick has to hack her hand off with a machete to free Carl. Her oldest son, Ron, blames Rick for everything that's happened to his family. Ron raises a gun at Rick, and Michonne puts her katana through his chest. But as Ron falls, his gun goes off. The bullet hits Carl in the right eye. Carl survives. Rick carries his son to the infirmary, where Denise, the community's doctor, saves his life. Carl loses the eye, but keeps his life, and he spends the rest of the series with a bandage and later an eye socket that he occasionally uses to make people uncomfortable, which is very Carl. While Denise works on Carl, Rick walks outside with a hatchet and starts killing walkers. One by one, alone, in the middle of the night, surrounded by thousands of the dead, Rick Grimes just starts swinging. And one by one, the other Alexandrians see him and join in. Michonne, Aaron, Spencer. The people who are hiding in their houses come out with whatever weapons they can find. And together, the entire community fights. They push the herd back. They reclaim their streets. By dawn, Alexandria is littered with walker bodies, but it's still standing. It's a turning point for the community. The Alexandrians who survived the siege are different people than the ones who hid behind their walls, baking casseroles. They've fought. They've bled. They understand now. A couple of weeks later, Rick and Michonne finally acknowledge what's been building between them for seasons. They fall into each other's arms on a couch, and the next morning, they wake up together. Rick and Michonne. It feels right. It feels earned. These two people who have lost so much, who have kept each other alive, who have watched each other become harder and stronger, and somehow still manage to stay human. If there's a love story at the heart of The Walking Dead, it's theirs. Now, around this time, the group meets someone new, a man who calls himself Jesus. His real name is Paul Rovia, and he's a scout from a community called the Hilltop Colony, which is about a day's drive from Alexandria. Jesus is agile, clever, and annoyingly good at escaping from custody. He breaks into Rick and Michonne's house, and they catch him, and he calmly tells them that they're not the only community out there. There's a whole network, and some of them need help. Jesus takes Rick, Michonne, Glenn, Maggie, and others to the Hilltop. It's a large community built around a historical plantation house called Barrington House. It's run by a man named Gregory, who is, to put it charitably, terrible at his job. Gregory is self-serving, cowardly, manipulative, and condescending. He talks to women like they're beneath him and treats leadership like a personal fiefdom. The Hilltop has a problem. They're being extorted by a group called the Saviors, led by a man named Negan. The Saviors show up at the Hilltop regularly and take half of everything: food, medicine, supplies. If the Hilltop resists, people die. Gregory and the Hilltop have been submitting to this arrangement because they don't have the strength or the will to fight back. Rick sees an opportunity. He proposes a deal. Alexandria will take care of the saviors in exchange for food and supplies from the hilltop. The hilltop agrees, and Rick leads a preemptive strike against a savior outpost. This is a crucial moral moment in the show. Rick and his people attack the outpost at night, while many of the saviors are sleeping. They kill dozens of people, not in self-defense, not in the heat of battle, but in a planned assault on people they've never met, based on second-hand information about what those people have done. Glenn kills someone for the first time up close in their bed. He stabs a sleeping man in the head. The look on Glenn's face afterward tells you everything about the cost of what they've done. The group believes they've dealt with the saviors. They haven't. They've barely scratched the surface. What they attacked was a small outpost. The saviors are much, much larger than anyone realized. Things start to go wrong fast. Denise, Alexandria's only doctor, is killed on a supply run by a crossbow bolt through the eye, fired by a savior named Dwight, using Daryl's own crossbow, which was taken from him when he was briefly captured. Denise's death is sudden and shocking, a bolt through the head mid-sentence while she's giving an encouraging speech. It's one of those deaths that reminds you this show doesn't care about narrative timing. Daryl, enraged, charges off on his own to find Dwight. Glenn, Michonne and Rosita go after him to bring him back. All four of them are captured by the saviors. And then comes the season 6 finale, which is one of the most talked about, debated and controversial episodes in the history of television. Rick and the remaining group are trying to get Maggie, who is having pregnancy complications, to the Hilltop's doctor. They load up an RV and drive, but every road is blocked. Every route has saviors standing in it. The saviors are herding them, corralling them, like the group tried to do with the quarry herd at the beginning of the season. The irony is deliberate. Eventually, deep in the woods at night, the saviors surround them completely. Rick's group is forced to their knees in a clearing. It's Rick, Carl, Michonne, Daryl, Glenn, Maggie, Abraham, Sasha, Rosita, Aaron and Eugene. 11 people on their knees in the dirt. A door opens on an RV and a man steps out. He's tall, lean, wearing a leather jacket. He's carrying a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. He calls the bat Lucille, and he introduces himself with a smile. "Hi, I'm Negan, and I do not appreciate you killing my people." Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays Negan, and from this first appearance, he owns every frame he's in. Negan is charming and terrifying in equal measure. He speaks in this casual, almost playful tone, like he's hosting a party instead of about to murder someone. He explains the New World Order. Rick's group works for him now. They provide for him. They belong to him. And to make sure they understand, he needs to make an example. Negan paces in front of the line, swinging Lucille, playing a game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. He points the bat at each person in turn. The camera shows their faces. Glenn sweating, Abraham defiant, Maggie barely able to hold herself up, Rick trembling for the first time in the entire series. Negan makes his choice. He brings the bat down. We hear the impact. We hear the screaming. The screen cuts to black, and we don't see who he killed. The show ended the season on that cliffhanger, and people lost their minds. The internet erupted. Viewers were furious, not because the scene was bad. The scene was incredibly well crafted, one of the most tense and terrifying sequences the show ever produced. People were angry because they had to wait 6 months to find out who died. 6 months of speculation, theories, frame-by-frame analysis of the camera angles, heated debates on message boards. Some people called it brilliant marketing. Others called it a betrayal of the audience. Both sides had a point. I remember waiting for that premiere. I remember the pit in my stomach, because I knew on some level that whoever Negan killed was going to change everything. And I was right, but we'll get to that in a moment. For now, just picture that clearing in the woods. 11 people on their knees, a man with a bat, and the sickening sound of it connecting with someone's skull in the dark. That's where we are. That's the moment everything in The Walking Dead pivots. Season 7 opens exactly where Season 6 left off. The clearing. The lineup. Negan standing with Lucille. And now, finally, after months of waiting, we see who he chose. It's Abraham. Abraham Ford, the red-haired army sergeant who survived the apocalypse through sheer force of will, who carried Eugene to Washington on a lie and kept going anyway, who found love with Sasha after years of carrying guilt over his family's death. Negan brings the bat down on Abraham's head, and Abraham, being Abraham, looks Negan in the eye after the first blow and says, "Suck my nuts." That's Abraham's last line. Defiant to the end, Negan beats him to death while the group watches. It's horrific. It's graphic. And for a moment, it seems like that's it. One death. Terrible but survivable. The group is devastated but intact. Then Daryl does something impulsive. He jumps up and punches Negan in the face. It's pure rage, pure reflex, and it's the worst thing he could have done. Negan doesn't kill Daryl. That would be letting him off easy. Instead, Negan turns around, walks down the line, and brings Lucille down on Glenn's head. Glenn Rhee, the pizza delivery guy from Atlanta who saved Rick's life in the very first episode. The man who fell in love with Maggie Green and married her and was about to become a father. Glenn, who was kind in a world that punished kindness. Glenn, who was played by Stephen Yeun for 6 seasons and who had become the heart of the show for millions of viewers. Negan kills Glenn slowly. The first blow crushes his skull but doesn't kill him. Glenn looks up at Maggie, his eye bulging, blood streaming down his face, and his last words are, "Maggie, I'll find you." And then Negan finishes him. I'm not going to pretend that scene was easy to watch. It wasn't. It's one of the most brutal things ever shown on a major television network. A lot of people stopped watching the show after that episode. The ratings, which had been the highest in cable history, started a decline that continued for the rest of the series. Whether Glenn's death was the right creative choice is something people still debate. But what's undeniable is that it changed the show forever. The Walking Dead was never quite the same after that night in the clearing. After the kills, Negan forces Rick into complete submission. He threatens to cut Carl's arm off unless Rick picks up an axe and does it himself. Rick, broken and trembling, actually raises the axe. He's about to do it. And at the last second, Negan stops him. It was a test. Negan wanted to see if Rick was broken, and he is, completely. Negan tells Rick that this is the new arrangement. Rick's people will find things, scavenge things, grow things, build things, and they will give half of everything to the Saviors. If they refuse, people die. If they resist, people die. If they run, people die. Negan takes Daryl as a hostage. Daryl is locked in a cell at the Saviors compound, called the Sanctuary. He's kept in a dark room, fed dog food sandwiches, and forced to listen to a cheerful pop song on repeat as a form of psychological torture. Dwight, the man who killed Denise, is assigned to break him. Dwight himself is a tragic figure. His wife Sherry was taken by Negan as one of his wives, essentially a harem of women who agree to be with Negan in exchange for privileges. Dwight's face was burned with an iron by Negan as punishment for trying to escape. He serves Negan out of terror, not loyalty. The first half of season 7 is bleak. Really bleak. Rick is compliant, almost zombie-like. He goes on runs, he scavenges, he delivers supplies to the Saviors. The man who bit a guy's throat out to protect his son is now carrying baskets of fruit to the man who murdered his friends. It's painful to watch, and it's meant to be. But other people are not as broken. Maggie, pregnant and grieving, moves to the hilltop and starts building a power base. She's becoming a leader. Gregory, the hilltop's nominal leader, tries to undermine her at every turn, but Maggie is smarter, tougher, and more respected. The people of the hilltop follow her because she earns it, one decision at a time. We're also introduced to some new communities during this stretch. The kingdom is led by King Ezekiel, and this is one of my favourite introductions in the whole show. Ezekiel is a former zookeeper who speaks in this elaborate, theatrical, almost Shakespearean manner. He sits on a throne. He has a pet Bengal tiger named Shiva. He calls his community a kingdom, and when Carol, who has been struggling with her own demons, confronts him and asks him to drop the act, Ezekiel admits the truth. Before the apocalypse, he was just a regular guy who worked at a zoo and did community theatre. The King Ezekiel persona is a character he plays because people need someone to believe in. They need a leader who seems larger than life, because the reality is too small and too frightening. The act gives people hope. And isn't that worth something? Carol sees through him, but she also respects what he's doing. And over time, she and Ezekiel develop a relationship that's one of the show's gentlest love stories. Carol, who has been through unimaginable violence, finds something like peace with a man who pretends to be a king and has a pet tiger. There's something quietly beautiful about that. There's also Oceanside, a hidden community made up almost entirely of women and children. The saviors found them early on and killed every male over the age of 10. The women fled and built a secret compound near the coast. They refuse to fight. They refuse to be found. They just want to survive. Their existence becomes important later. And then there are the scavengers, also known as the junkyard people, led by a woman named Jadis, who speaks in a bizarre, clipped, almost alien syntax. They live in a junkyard, they speak like they've forgotten full sentences, and they're exactly as trustworthy as a group of junkyard-dwelling weirdos sounds. Which is to say, not at all. Back in Alexandria, things come to a head when Spencer Monroe, Deanna's surviving son, tries to go behind Rick's back and make a deal with Negan. Spencer tells Negan that Rick is a bad leader and that things would be better if Spencer were in charge. Negan listens politely, then pulls out a knife, cuts Spencer open from belly to hip, and watches his intestines spill onto the pavement. "I just slid my knife inside of you," Negan says, almost admiringly. "How about that? You did have guts. I've never been so wrong in my whole life." It's a horrible joke, and it's also a message. Negan doesn't respect cowards. He doesn't respect backstabbers. He respects strength, even in his enemies. Sasha, consumed by grief over Abraham's death, decides to try to assassinate Negan on her own. She infiltrates the sanctuary and is captured. Negan gives her a choice: join him or die. Sasha chooses a third option. She takes a poison capsule that Eugene, who's been captured and essentially defected to the Saviors, gives her. She dies inside a coffin that Negan intends to present to Rick as a gift. When the coffin opens, Sasha emerges as a walker and attacks Negan, buying the group a few crucial seconds during a standoff. Season 7 ends with Rick declaring war. He's been quietly building an alliance. Alexandria, the Hilltop, and the Kingdom unite against the Saviors. The first battle is supposed to happen at Alexandria, with the Scavengers fighting alongside Rick's coalition. But the Scavengers betray them. Jadis and her people switch sides mid-battle, turning their guns on Rick's group. The Saviors escape. It's a setback, but not a defeat. Rick stands on the steps of Alexandria and tells his people that the fight has begun. They're going to war. Season 8 is that war, and it's called, appropriately enough, the All-Out War arc. It spans the entire season, and it involves battles across multiple communities. The fighting is fierce and chaotic. People die on both sides. Supplies are destroyed. Communities are damaged. The kingdom takes the worst of it early on. Ezekiel leads a group of his soldiers into an ambush, and nearly all of them are killed. Ezekiel, who has been playing the role of a confident, unshakable king, breaks down completely. His people are dead. Shiva, his beloved tiger, sacrifices herself to save him from a group of walkers, leaping into the herd and being torn apart. Ezekiel kneels in the dirt, stripped of everything that made him King Ezekiel. And he's just a man, a scared, heartbroken man. Somewhere in the middle of all this, something happens that changes the course of the entire show. Carl Grimes, Rick's son, the boy who shot Shane in a field, who lost his mother in a prison, who lost his eye in Alexandria, is bitten by a walker. It happens during a quiet moment, when Carl is helping a stranger named Siddiq collect herbs in the woods. A walker ambushes them. Carl kills it, but not before it bites him on the torso. Carl doesn't tell anyone at first. He goes home. He writes letters. He writes one to Rick. He writes one to Michonne. He writes one to Negan. He writes one to Enid, the girl he'd been developing feelings for. He takes care of Judith. He takes a picture with her. And then when the bite starts to take hold, he tells his father. The scene where Rick sees the bite is devastating. Carl lifts his shirt and shows his father the wound, and Rick's face just crumbles. He can't accept it. He refuses to accept it. He says they'll get help. They'll find a doctor. They'll fix this. Carl, who at this point is probably more mature than his father, shakes his head and tells Rick it's okay. He's not afraid. Carl spends his last hours telling Rick what he wants for the future. He wants the communities to find peace. He wants Rick to stop fighting. He wants Negan to be part of that peace somehow. Carl believes, even now, even dying, that mercy is possible. that the cycle of violence can be broken. He asks Rick to make that the world he builds. Carl dies in a sewer beneath Alexandria, with Rick and Michonne by his side. He shoots himself to prevent reanimation. He's 16 years old. I still don't know how I feel about Carl's death. It was the showrunner's decision, and it was hugely controversial because Carl is alive in the comics well past this point. He's supposed to grow up. He's supposed to be the future. A lot of fans saw it as a mistake, a creative choice made for shock value at the expense of a character whose journey was far from over. I get that. But I also think Carl's death gives the ending of the war a weight it wouldn't otherwise have. Everything Rick does after this point is in service of Carl's dying wish. The war grinds on. Eugene, who has been working for Negan and manufacturing ammunition for the Saviors, makes a choice. He sabotages the bullets. When the final battle comes and the Saviors fire their guns, the weapons backfire. The rifles explode in their hands. The Saviors are stunned, wounded, disarmed. The Coalition forces overwhelm them. Rick and Negan fight one-on-one under a tree with stained glass windows. It's biblical in its imagery. Rick asks Negan for 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds to talk. He talks about Carl, about what Carl wanted, about the future Carl envisioned. And then mid-sentence, Rick slashes Negan's throat with a piece of glass. Negan falls. He's bleeding out, and everyone expects Rick to let him die. Maggie is screaming at Rick to finish it. She wants Negan dead. She needs Negan dead. Glenn's blood demands it. But Rick says, save him. He tells Sadiq that Dr. Carl died trying to save, to patch Negan up. He's not going to kill him. He's going to keep him alive, locked in a cell, as a reminder that there's another way. That mercy is possible, that Carl's death meant something. Maggie is furious. She feels betrayed by Rick. She makes a secret vow that someday she will make Negan pay for what he did. But for now, the war is over. Negan is imprisoned in a basement cell in Alexandria. The Saviors surrender. The communities begin the long, slow process of rebuilding. The war cost them everything. Friends, family, their sense of safety, their belief that the future could be simple. But they survived. And survival in this world is never guaranteed. I want to take a moment here, if you don't mind, to just acknowledge the weight of what we've been through. We're past the halfway point of the series now, and look at what these characters have endured. Rick has lost his wife, his best friend, his son. Maggie has lost her father, her sister, and her husband. Carol has lost her daughter, her adopted son, and pieces of her own humanity. Daryl has lost his brother and his sense of self. Every single person in this story has been broken and rebuilt, sometimes more than once. And the show's not done breaking them yet, but it's also not done finding moments of beauty, of connection, of quiet hope in the spaces between the horror. That's what keeps you watching, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. All right, let's keep going. There's a time jump coming, a big one, and with it, a whole new chapter of this story. Season 9 is where The Walking Dead reinvents itself. Not gradually, not subtly, but with a seismic shift that changes everything about the show. It begins in a recognizable place, with the communities trying to rebuild after the war, and then it takes you somewhere entirely new. The war with the Saviors is over, but the peace is fragile. The communities are working together on a shared project, a bridge that will connect them and allow trade and communication. It's a symbol of unity, of the future Carl envisioned. Rick is the driving force behind it. He's pouring his grief into this bridge, channeling his loss into something constructive. If he can just build this one thing, if he can just connect these communities, then maybe Carl didn't die for nothing. But the peace keeps fraying. The former Saviors are struggling to integrate. Many of them resent being forced to submit. Some of them sabotage the bridge project. Tensions between the communities simmer and occasionally boil over. Maggie, who is now leading the Hilltop, still hasn't forgiven Rick for sparing Negan. There's a distance between them that neither knows how to close. There's a particularly intense moment when a former savior named Justin is killed, and suspicion falls on the Oceanside women, who have been secretly executing saviors in revenge for the massacre of their men. The revelation drives another wedge between the communities. How do you build a future with people who are murdering your workers in the night? Rick begins to realize that the bridge and the unity it represents may be impossible. The communities are too hurt, too angry, too scarred by what happened. The dream of a connected future is slipping away. And then comes the day that changes everything. A crisis erupts at the bridge construction site. A herd of walkers is approaching. The bridge is structurally unsound and likely to collapse under the weight. Rick realizes that if the herd crosses the bridge and reaches the communities beyond, people will die. So he makes a choice. He lures the herd onto the bridge, positions himself at the far end, and shoots a case of dynamite. The bridge explodes. The herd is destroyed, and Rick Grimes is caught in the blast. Everyone watching from the shore believes Rick is dead. Michonne screams. Daryl turns away. The group mourns the man who held them together since the beginning. But Rick isn't dead. He washes up downstream, barely alive, bleeding out on the bank of a river, and someone finds him. Anne, the woman formerly known as Jadis, the leader of the junkyard scavengers. Throughout the season, Anne has been in secret contact with a mysterious organisation. She's been trading people to them, loading survivors onto a helicopter in exchange for supplies. Now, with Rick dying on the riverbank, she makes a call. She tells whoever is on the other end that she has a bee, someone of value. She asks for extraction. A helicopter arrives, and Rick is loaded aboard. Rick Grimes leaves The Walking Dead in Season 9, Episode 5. Andrew Lincoln, who had played Rick for 9 years, stepped away from the show. It was a massive deal. Rick was the main character, the anchor, the person the entire show was built around. Without him, the show had to find a new identity. And then the screen goes dark, and when it comes back, everything is different. 6 years have passed. The time jump is disorienting in the best way. Alexandria still exists, but it looks different. The walls are reinforced, new buildings have been constructed, the solar panels are working, and there, in the middle of the road, wearing Rick's hat and carrying his Colt Python revolver, is a girl. She's about 10 years old. She has long brown hair and a confident walk and a sharp eye. It's Judith Grimes, Rick's daughter. The baby born in the prison, the infant who was carried through the wilderness, is now a child, and she carries herself like her father. She saves a group of strangers from walkers calmly and efficiently and invites them to Alexandria, because that's what her dad would have done. Michonne is leading Alexandria now, and she's built it into something formidable. But the communities have fractured. After Rick's apparent death, the bridges between them, both literal and figurative, fell apart. Alexandria, the hilltop, the kingdom, and Oceanside have isolated themselves from each other. They communicate through intermediaries. They don't trade like they used to. The dream Rick had for a connected future died with him. Or at least, that's what everyone believes. Negan is still in his cell, 6 years, and he hasn't left that small room in Alexandria's basement. He's read every book. He's talked to Judith through the window, which is an interesting dynamic. Judith visits him. She asks him questions. She tells him about her day. She sees him as a person, not a monster, because to her, the events of the war are stories, not memories. She was a baby when Glenn died. She never knew the Negan who swung the bat. She only knows the man in the cell. The new characters introduced after the time jump include Magna, a tough, distrustful woman with a criminal past. Yumiko, her partner, who is calm and strategic. Connie, who is deaf and communicates through sign language, and who becomes one of the most capable and beloved characters in the later seasons. Her sister Kelly and their friend Luke, a gentleman who believes that music and art are what makes civilization worth saving. They arrive at Alexandria's gates, and they bring with them a sense that the world is bigger and more populated than the communities realized. And then the Whisperers arrive, and everything changes again. The introduction of the Whisperers is one of the most chilling moments in the entire series. Jesus, Paul Rovia, the scout from the hilltop who introduced Rick to the wider world, is out in the fog with Aaron and a small group, searching for a missing person. They encounter a herd of walkers in a foggy cemetery. As they fight the walkers, something strange happens. The walkers are moving differently. They're circling. They're coordinating. They're dodging attacks. And then one of them whispers, "Don't let them get away." Jesus turns around, and a walker stabs him through the back with a knife. Jesus falls. He's dead. And when the group pulls the mask off the attacker, they find a living human being underneath. A person wearing the skin of a dead walker over their face and body. Walking among the herd, blending in with the dead. The Whisperers are a group of people who have abandoned civilization entirely. They believe that the dead inherited the earth, and the only way for the living to survive is to join them. They wear the skins of walkers to mask their scent and move freely among the herds. They don't build walls. They don't have houses. They sleep on the ground. They have no names, no leaders in the traditional sense, and no rules except one. Alpha decides. Alpha is always right. Alpha is their leader, and she is terrifying. Played by Samantha Morton, Alpha is a shaved-headed woman who speaks in a low, calm voice and carries herself with the absolute certainty of someone who has stripped away every human comfort and found clarity on the other side. She gave up her name, her identity, her attachment to the old world. She refers to emotions as weakness. She sees civilization as a lie. Alpha's second in command is Beta, a massive hulking man who wears a walker mask that covers his entire face. Before the apocalypse, Beta was actually a famous country music singer, which is a detail the show reveals later and which is just bizarre enough to work. Beta is fanatically devoted to Alpha and views any threat to her authority as a personal affront. Alpha has a daughter named Lydia, a teenager who has been raised among the Whisperers since she was a child. Lydia doesn't know any other life. She's been conditioned to believe that Alpha's way is the only way. But when Lydia is captured by the communities and brought to the hilltop, she begins to see another possibility. She bonds with Henry, Carol, and Ezekiel's adopted son. She sees people who have kitchens and beds and laugh at dinner tables. She sees a world Alpha told her didn't exist anymore. Lydia defects. She chooses to stay with the communities. And Alpha, despite her philosophy of detachment and strength, is hurt by this. Hurt and furious, Alpha retaliates with one of the most shocking acts of violence in the series. During a trade fair at the Kingdom, a gathering designed to reunite the communities and celebrate cooperation, Alpha infiltrates in disguise. She's wearing normal clothes, blending in with the crowd. Nobody recognizes her, and she chooses 10 people. 10 people from among the fairgoers. She takes them quietly, one by one, away from the festivities. She decapitates all 10 of them and places their reanimated heads on pikes along a hill, marking the border of Whisperer territory. The line of pikes stretches across the landscape like a grotesque fence. The people on those pikes include Henry, Carol's adopted son; Tara, who'd been with the group since the governor's attack on the prison; Enid, the young woman Carl had cared about; Ozzy, DJ, Frankie, Tammy Rose, Rodney, Addie, and a man named Alec. 10 people, some of them we'd known for years. Others were newer to the story, all of them murdered and displayed as a warning. When Daryl and the others find the pikes, the horror is absolute. Siddiq, who was captured by Alpha, but released as a messenger, breaks down as he describes what happened. Carol sees Henry's head on a pike, and the sound she makes is something you feel in your bones. It's not a scream, it's this low, keening wail that sounds like something being torn apart from the inside. Alpha brings Daryl to a cliff overlooking a valley and shows him what she's been hiding. Thousands upon thousands of walkers, filling the valley floor like a sea of the dead. Alpha's horde. She tells Daryl that if the communities cross her border, if they come for her, she will unleash that herd on them, and everyone they love will die. The communities are terrified. They retreat behind their walls and draw new maps and stay on their side of the border. Alpha has won for now. Season 9 ends with something unexpected. Snow falls. For the first time in the entire series, winter comes to The Walking Dead. The communities are caught in a deadly blizzard, and they're forced to cross through Whisperer territory to survive. Negan escapes his cell during the chaos, walking out into the snow, but when he finds nothing out there for him, no community to join, no purpose to serve, he returns to his cell voluntarily. There's something poignant about that. The world's most notorious killer, the man who terrorized entire communities, has nowhere to go. His cell is the only home he has. The season closes with the communities huddled together against the cold, radio chatter crackling between them for the first time in years. The isolation is ending. The walls between the communities are starting to come down, not because of a bridge or a treaty, but because of a blizzard and a shared enemy. And somewhere out there, beyond the border, Alpha and her horde are waiting. That's the end of Season 9. It's really 2 shows in one, isn't it? The first 5 episodes are the conclusion of Rick's story, and then the time jump launches an entirely new era. I'll be honest, when Rick left, I wasn't sure the show could survive it. A lot of people felt the same way, but what came after? The Whisperers? The evolution of the remaining characters? The transformation of people like Negan and Carol? It justified the continuation. The show found a new heartbeat. It was different, but it was still alive. Let's see what happens next. The Whisperer War is about to begin, and it's going to demand things from these characters that even the war with Negan didn't. Season 10 is, in a lot of ways, the season where The Walking Dead finds its footing again after the massive changes of Season 9. Rick is gone. Carl is gone. The show has to rely on the characters who remain, and it does so beautifully. This season belongs to Carol, to Negan, to Daryl, and to the terrifying shadow of Alpha and her Whisperers. The communities are living in fear. Alpha's threat hangs over everything, like a storm that won't break. Her horde, those thousands of walkers in the valley, is a weapon she doesn't even need to use. The mere knowledge that it exists is enough to keep the communities paralyzed. They stay on their side of the border. They avoid Whisperer territory. They live small and quiet and scared. Alpha isn't content to just maintain the border, though. She tests it. She sends small groups of walkers toward Alexandria, guided by Whisperers walking among them. Not enough to overwhelm the walls, but enough to keep people on edge. It's psychological warfare. She wants the communities anxious, sleep-deprived, jumpy. She wants them to break from the inside. And it's working, especially on Carol. Carol has been destroyed by Henry's death. She's not sleeping. She's popping pills to stay awake because every time she closes her eyes, she sees Henry's head on that pike. She's consumed by a singular, burning desire for revenge. Carol wants Alpha dead, and she's willing to do almost anything to make it happen. Carol starts making reckless decisions. She crosses the border on her own. She chases Whisperers into traps. She nearly gets Daryl and others killed with her impulsive actions. Daryl, who loves Carol more than almost anyone, is caught between protecting her and stopping her. Their relationship, which has always been the emotional backbone of the show, is strained in ways it never has been before. Meanwhile, Alpha has planted a spy inside Alexandria. A man named Dante, who presents himself as a charming new doctor, has been secretly working for the Whisperers all along. He sabotages the water supply. He feeds information back to Alpha. And when Siddiq, the real doctor, figures out what's happening, Dante kills him, strangles him to death in the medical clinic. Siddiq, the man Carl died trying to save, murdered by a mole he trusted. Gabriel, who has evolved from the cowardly priest of Season 5 into a confident, sometimes ruthless leader, kills Dante when the truth comes out. It's a far cry from the man who locked his congregation outside. Gabriel has changed as much as anyone on this show. Now, here's where the season gets really interesting. Carol hatches a plan, a dangerous, morally questionable, incredibly bold plan. She secretly arranges for Negan to escape from his cell. The escape looks natural, like a lapse in security. Nobody knows Carol orchestrated it, and she gives Negan a mission. Infiltrate the Whisperers, earn Alpha's trust, and kill her. Negan agrees, and his journey into the Whisperers' camp is fascinating to watch. Here is a man who ran his own authoritarian community, who ruled through fear and charisma, who understands power dynamics better than almost anyone. He walks into Alpha's world, and he plays the game perfectly. He's deferential when he needs to be. He's useful. He kills a survivor to prove his loyalty. He earns his mask. He walks among the dead, and then something unexpected happens. Negan and Alpha develop a genuine connection. There's a scene where they sit together in a clearing, and Alpha removes her mask, and for the first time, we see her as a person, not just a villain. She's lonely. She's carried the weight of her philosophy for so long that she's forgotten what it feels like to be seen by another human being. Negan sees her. He understands her, and she in turn sees something in Negan that most people miss. Intelligence, survival instinct, a willingness to do whatever the situation demands. Beta watches all of this with barely concealed jealousy and suspicion. Beta's devotion to Alpha is absolute, almost religious. He doesn't trust Negan, and he's right not to. But Alpha overrules him. She trusts Negan, and that trust is going to cost her everything. The moment comes in an episode called Walk With Us, which is one of the best episodes of the entire back half of the series. Negan tells Alpha that he knows where Lydia is hiding. He leads her to a remote cabin in the woods, promising that her daughter is inside. Alpha approaches the cabin with something almost like hope in her eyes. She opens the door. The cabin is empty. Alpha turns around and Negan is there. He tells her that Lydia isn't there, that she's safe, that she's found a real life. And then he cuts her throat. Alpha dies looking up at the sky, her blood soaking into the dirt. Negan takes her head. He brings it to Carol. When Negan delivers Alpha's head, the camera holds on Carol's face and you can see the conflict. She got what she wanted. The woman who killed Henry is dead. But the cost of that revenge, the manipulation, the moral compromise, the fact that she used Negan as a weapon, none of that sits easily. Carol places Alpha's reanimated head on one of the border pikes. A message, a response, the head that terrorized them, now just another trophy on a stick. With Alpha dead, the Whisperers fracture. Beta, who was already emotionally unstable, completely unravels. He takes Alpha's reanimated head and carries it with him, whispering to it, pressing his face against it. He becomes the new leader of the Whisperers by default, and his leadership style is simple. Destroy everything. He rallies the remaining Whisperers and unleashes the Horde. Thousands of walkers, guided by masked humans walking among them, marching toward the communities. The Battle of the Tower is the climactic confrontation. The survivors make their stand at an abandoned hospital. They use sound and light to try to disperse the herd. Daryl faces Beta one-on-one in the darkness of a stairwell. Beta is enormous, brutal, and completely insane. He's been unmasked at this point, and we see his face, and it's the face of a man who used to be a beloved recording artist. Ryan Hurst plays Beta with this tragic, broken intensity that makes you almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Daryl kills Beta by stabbing him in both eyes. Beta falls into the herd and is torn apart by the walkers, who finally see him as just another body. The Whisperers' horde is dispersed through a combination of sound equipment and coordinated efforts from the Coalition. The Whisperer war is over. Alpha is dead. Beta is dead. The horde is scattered. But the cost, as always, is high. There's another significant departure in Season 10. Michonne, who has been leading Alexandria since Rick's disappearance, discovers something that changes everything for her. On a mission to a remote island, she finds evidence that Rick may still be alive. She finds his boots. She finds a phone with etchings on the screen, scratched drawings of her face and Judith's face. Rick was here. Rick was alive. Maybe he still is. Michonne makes the hardest decision of her life. She leaves. She says goodbye to Judith over the radio, telling her daughter that she has to find Rick. Judith, being Judith, understands. She tells her mom to go, to find him, to bring him home. Danai Gurira, who played Michonne, left the show at this point, and her departure is handled with grace and emotion. Michonne doesn't get a death scene. She gets a quest. She's out there somewhere, tracking Rick, following the clues he left behind. And even though we don't see her journey in the main show, we know she's coming. She won't stop. She never stops. Season 10 also includes several bonus episodes that were produced during the COVID-19 pandemic, when full-scale production was difficult. These episodes are smaller, more intimate, focused on individual characters. There's one that explores Negan's backstory, showing his life before the apocalypse. His wife, Lucille, the real Lucille, was dying of cancer when the outbreak hit. She reanimated, and Negan had to put her down. The bat, the one he carried for years, the one he used to kill Glenn and Abraham, is named after his dead wife. It's a detail that recontextualizes everything about Negan. The bat wasn't just a weapon, it was his grief, made physical. There's an episode focused on Daryl alone in the wilderness, tracking a dog and reflecting on his life. There's one about Carol and Daryl dreaming about running away from everything, abandoning the communities and just going. These episodes are quiet and introspective, and they're some of the most human the show has ever been. Negan's redemption arc is perhaps the most complex character journey in the series. This is a man who murdered Glenn, who terrorized communities, who kept women as concubines, who burned people's faces with irons. And now the show's asking you to root for him, or at least to understand him. Jeffrey Dean Morgan walks that line masterfully. Negan doesn't become a good person in Season 10. He becomes a complicated person. A person who did terrible things and is now trying, imperfectly and without expectation of forgiveness, to do better. Whether that's enough is a question the show lets you answer for yourself. Maggie returns to the hilltop near the end of Season 10, and her reaction to learning that Negan is free, that Negan killed Alpha, that Negan is being treated as something approaching an ally, is exactly what you'd expect. Fury, disgust, betrayal. How dare they? How dare anyone forgive the man who took Glenn from her? From their son, Herschel Jr., who never got to meet his father. The tension between Maggie and Negan, between justice and pragmatism, between the past and the future, becomes one of the driving forces of the final season. It's never resolved neatly because it can't be. Some wounds don't heal, some debts can't be repaid, and forgiveness, when it comes, doesn't come because anyone deserves it. It comes because carrying the anger is too heavy. Or it doesn't come at all. We're deep into the story now. If you're still listening, I appreciate the company. And if you've drifted off, well, I hope the story found its way into your dreams. We've got one more season to cover, and it's a big one. The Commonwealth, the final battle, the end of The Walking Dead. Let's keep going. We're almost there. The final season of The Walking Dead is 24 episodes long, which makes it the biggest season the show ever produced. It aired in 3 parts over the course of about a year and a half, from August 2021 to November 2022. And it has a lot of ground to cover. New communities, new villains, the return of old characters, and eventually the end of the story that began with Rick Grimes waking up in a hospital bed 12 years earlier. Season 11 opens with the communities in crisis. Alexandria is in bad shape. The walls have been damaged by storms and battles. The crops are failing. Food supplies are running dangerously low. People are hungry. People are scared. The optimism that carried them through the Whisperer War has faded into something more desperate. For the first time, the question isn't just, can we survive the walkers? It's, can we survive the winter? Maggie has returned with a small group of survivors from a community she'd been building called Meridian. But Meridian was attacked and destroyed by a group called the Reapers, a militaristic, highly trained squad of former soldiers and mercenaries who have bonded together through religious fanaticism and combat trauma. The Reapers are led by a man named Pope, who believes God has chosen him and his people to survive, and that anyone outside their group is an enemy to be eliminated. The Reapers are different from previous villains. They're not a community like Woodbury or the Saviours. They're a unit, a tight, lethal, professional killing team. They use military tactics, booby traps, and coordinated assaults. They're smaller in number than previous antagonist groups, but they're more dangerous per person. They've been hunting Maggie and her people across the countryside, and they've already killed most of them. Maggie leads a mission to Meridian to reclaim the food supplies stored there. She takes a group that includes Nulgan, which is about as uncomfortable as it sounds. Maggie and Negan walking side by side, fighting side by side, despite the fact that Maggie would like nothing more than to watch Negan die. She keeps him around because he's useful. He's smart, he's capable, and he understands how violent people think. But every time she looks at him, she sees Glenn on his knees. Negan knows this, and in a remarkably honest moment during their journey, he tells Maggie something that nobody expected. He tells her that he doesn't regret what he did. Not entirely. He regrets the way he did it, the cruelty of it, the spectacle. But in his mind, at that time, killing someone from Rick's group was necessary to establish control. He tells Maggie that he was wrong about a lot of things, but he's not going to lie to her and say the whole thing was a mistake, because that would be a different kind of cruelty. It's a brutal thing to say to a widow. And it's also, in a strange way, the most honest thing anyone has ever said to Maggie about Glenn's death. Everyone else has offered sympathy, condolences, righteous anger. Negan offers her the truth as he sees it. And Maggie doesn't forgive him. She doesn't thank him. But something shifts between them, not toward friendship or warmth, but toward a kind of exhausted, pragmatic coexistence. They both know they're going to be in each other's lives, whether they like it or not. They might as well stop pretending otherwise. The Reaper arc reaches its climax at Meridian. Daryl gets pulled into the situation in a complicated way because his former girlfriend, a woman named Leah, is one of the Reapers. Leah and Daryl had a relationship during the time jump, before she disappeared and before Daryl returned to the communities full-time. Now she's part of Pope's cult, and she's torn between her loyalty to her unit and her feelings for Daryl. Pope is killed during the Meridian confrontation. Leah takes over the Reapers briefly, but is forced to retreat. She becomes a recurring threat for a while longer, hunting Maggie in particular, before her storyline eventually resolves. The Reaper arc is one of the more divisive parts of the final season. Some fans felt it was compelling and added stakes to the early episodes. Others felt it was a distraction from the bigger story that was building. I lean somewhere in the middle. The Reapers served their purpose. They gave Maggie a reason to be desperate, and they raised the stakes of the food shortage, but they were never going to be remembered the way the Governor, or Negan, or Alpha are remembered. Now, running parallel to the Reaper storyline, something much bigger is developing. Something that will define the entire final act of The Walking Dead. Eugene Porter has been talking to someone on the radio. Remember Eugene? The mullet-wearing scientist who lied about having a cure, who was captured by the Saviors and essentially switched sides, who sabotaged the ammunition at the end of the war. Eugene has grown a lot since then. He's still awkward. He still speaks in that over-formal vocabulary-heavy way that makes him sound like he swallowed a thesaurus. But he's found courage. He's found purpose. And he's found a voice on the radio. Her name is Stephanie. At least that's what she tells him. Eugene and Stephanie have been having conversations over the airwaves for weeks, maybe months. They talk about books, about music, about what the world used to be like. Eugene falls for her hard, in the way that only someone who has spent years feeling unlovable can fall. Stephanie represents everything Eugene has been afraid to hope for. Connection, acceptance, maybe even love. Stephanie tells Eugene she's from a large community, and she eventually agrees to meet. Eugene assembles a small group to make the journey. Ezekiel comes along, partly because he's sick. Ezekiel has been hiding a lump on his neck. He has cancer, or at least what appears to be cancer, and without medical treatment, he's going to die. The possibility of a community with real doctors is worth the risk of the trip. Yumiko comes because she's looking for her brother, who she believes may have ended up at this community. And Princess joins the group. Princess, whose real name is Juanita Sanchez, is one of the final season's most distinctive characters. She's been alone for over a year when the group meets her, living in a rail yard, wearing a bright purple jacket and carrying a staff. She's loud, energetic, talks too much, makes inappropriate jokes, and is clearly dealing with some serious anxiety and possible PTSD from her time alone. She's also fiercely loyal once she decides she trusts someone, and her energy provides a counterbalance to the grimness of the late series storytelling. Eugene's group reaches the meeting point and waits for Stephanie. Instead of Stephanie, they're surrounded by soldiers in white armor, carrying automatic weapons. They're ordered to the ground and processed with forms and intake procedures and identification photos. The bureaucratic precision of it is almost more unsettling than a direct attack. These people have systems. They have paperwork. They have an organization that runs on rules and hierarchy. This is the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is unlike anything The Walking Dead has ever shown us. It's a community of over 50,000 people. 50,000. To put that in perspective, Alexandria, at its peak, had maybe 150 residents. The Hilltop, maybe 100. The Commonwealth is a city, a functioning, organized, stratified city with neighborhoods and businesses and a military and a government and yes, even an ice cream shop. There are bakeries and restaurants and a hospital with actual medical equipment. People wear clean clothes. They have jobs. They go to work in the morning and come home at night. It's the closest thing to the pre-apocalypse world that anyone in this story has ever seen. The Commonwealth has a governor, in the political sense, named Pamela Milton. She's a former politician, polished and articulate, and practiced in the art of saying things that sound reasonable while serving her own interests. Pamela runs the Commonwealth with a firm hand and a fixed smile. She attends parties, she gives speeches, she projects confidence and stability, And underneath all of it, she's maintaining a class system that mirrors the worst aspects of the old world. In the Commonwealth, your job before the apocalypse determines your status after it. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, business owners, they live in the estates, a gated neighbourhood of beautiful houses with manicured lawns. Everyone else, the workers, the labourers, the people who didn't have prestigious pre-apocalypse careers, they live in the lower districts. They do the hard jobs. They serve the wealthy. The Commonwealth didn't just rebuild civilization, it rebuilt inequality. Pamela's deputy is a man named Lance Hornsby, played with oily charm by Josh Hamilton. Lance is ambitious, calculating, and endlessly patient. He sees the Commonwealth as a tool for expanding his own power, and he sees the smaller communities, Alexandria, the Hilltop, Oceanside, as assets to be acquired. He approaches them with offers of help. Food, medicine, building materials. All they have to do is join the Commonwealth. For the communities, the offer is tempting. Alexandria is struggling. People are hungry. The walls need repair. The idea of having access to real resources, real medicine, real infrastructure, it's hard to refuse. Some people embrace the Commonwealth immediately. Others are wary. Maggie, in particular, wants nothing to do with it. She's seen what happens when you put your trust in someone else's system. She'd rather starve free than eat at someone else's table. The debate over whether to join the Commonwealth becomes one of the central tensions of the final season. It's not a simple good versus evil question. The Commonwealth isn't evil exactly. It provides real safety and real comfort to tens of thousands of people. But it does so at a cost. The class system is unjust. The military enforces compliance. Dissent is discouraged. And Pamela Milton's primary concern isn't the well-being of her people. It's the preservation of her power. Eugene, meanwhile, is having his own crisis. The woman he meets at the Commonwealth isn't Stephanie. Or rather, she is Stephanie. The name is real, but she's not the person he was talking to on the radio. The Commonwealth intercepted the radio communications and sent a different woman to meet Eugene, a plant designed to monitor him and his group. The real Stephanie is someone else, a woman named Max who works in Pamela's office. When Eugene discovers the deception, he's crushed. But when he meets the real Max, the woman whose voice he actually fell in love with, things start to click into place. Max is quiet, principled, and increasingly troubled by the corruption she witnesses in Pamela's inner circle. Eugene and Max form a genuine connection, and together with others who see the Commonwealth's rot, they begin to push back. They start an underground newspaper. They publish stories about the Commonwealth's abuses. They name names. They document the class system, the exploitation, the hypocrisy. The Commonwealth plotline is the show's most overtly political storyline, and it's a deliberate choice. After 10 seasons of fighting walkers and warlords, the final villain of The Walking Dead isn't a monster or a dictator. It's a system. It's bureaucracy. It's the comfortable lie that inequality is natural and necessary. It's the idea that some people deserve comfort and safety, and others don't, based on who they were before the world ended. Whether the show handles this commentary gracefully is debatable. Some viewers found it heavy-handed. Others thought it was the most relevant thing the show had done in years. Personally, I think there's something fitting about it. The Walking Dead started by asking what happens when civilization collapses. It ends by asking what happens when civilization comes back, and whether the people who rebuild it will make the same mistakes. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Commonwealth is still presenting itself as a saviour, and the communities are still deciding whether to accept the hand being offered. Things are about to get much worse before they get better. Let's keep going. The final act is coming, and it's going to test every single character we have left. As the final season progresses, the cracks in the Commonwealth's facade widen into chasms, and the man responsible for pulling apart the seams is Lance Hornsby. Lance has been working behind the scenes for months, positioning himself as the Commonwealth's most valuable diplomat. He's the one who negotiated with Alexandria. He's the one who offered help to the Hilltop. He's the one who visited Oceanside with supplies and smiles and handshakes. And every single gesture of generosity came with strings attached. Lance doesn't give, he invests. Every resource he provides, every favour he extends, is a transaction that accumulates interest. And when the bill comes due, the communities discover that the price of Commonwealth help is Commonwealth control. Lance begins installing Commonwealth soldiers in Alexandria and the hilltop. At first it's framed as protection. A few soldiers here, a patrol there, just to keep things safe. But the number of soldiers grows, and their presence becomes less like protection and more like occupation. The communities that fought for years to be free find themselves with armed guards at their gates, answering to someone else's authority. Maggie sees it coming before anyone else. She's been suspicious of the Commonwealth from the beginning, and Lance Hornsby in particular sets off every alarm she has. Maggie refuses to let the Hilltop join the Commonwealth's network. She keeps her people independent, which makes Lance furious. Independence is a threat to his plans. You can't control what you don't own. The situation escalates when Lance goes rogue. He's been operating with Pamela's implicit approval for most of his schemes, but his ambitions outpace even her tolerance. Lance orchestrates a hostile takeover of Alexandria, the Hilltop, and Oceanside. He uses Commonwealth soldiers to seize control by force, stripping the communities of their autonomy. Leaders are removed. People are reassigned. The communities lose their identities and become Commonwealth outposts. Alexandria, the place Rick built, the place where Michonne led, the place Judith calls home, is redesignated as Outpost 22. The name itself is an erasure. It's not Alexandria anymore. It's just a number, a node in the Commonwealth's network. The residents are given new assignments, many of them menial labour. People who are warriors, farmers, leaders, are now told where to go and what to do by soldiers who've never met them. Some of the community members are separated from their families. Children are taken to different locations. It's a systematic dismantling of everything these people have built, and it's done with the clinical efficiency of a bureaucracy that doesn't see individuals, only resources to be managed. This is the darkest the show gets in its final season, and it resonates because it's not about walkers. It's about power. It's about how easily safety can become captivity, how quickly a helping hand can become a clenched fist. The communities traded their freedom for food and medicine, and now they're discovering the true cost. Meanwhile, inside the Commonwealth itself, Pamela Milton's personal failures are compounding. Her son, Sebastian, is a privileged, entitled, genuinely terrible human being. Sebastian has grown up in the estates, shielded from the realities of the world outside the walls. He's never gone hungry. He's never fought a walker. He's never had to sacrifice anything. And he takes his position for granted in the most dangerous way possible. Sebastian concocts a scheme to enrich himself. He sends working-class Commonwealth citizens on dangerous missions into walker-infested houses to collect cash and valuables. He promises them advancement, better jobs, better housing. Some of them agree because they're desperate, and some of them die. They're killed by walkers in abandoned homes, searching for money that Sebastian doesn't need, all because the governor's son wanted pocket change and didn't care who got hurt getting it. When the truth about Sebastian's scheme comes out, it's explosive. Eugene and Max publish the story in their underground newspaper. The lower classes of the Commonwealth are outraged. A public confrontation turns violent, and in the chaos, Sebastian is killed. A walker gets him during a breach and the crowd watches him die. Some of them cheer. Pamela is devastated by Sebastian's death, but instead of introspection, she turns to rage. She blames the dissidents. She blames Eugene and Max and the newspaper. She blames the outsiders from Alexandria who brought their rebellious spirit into her orderly world. Pamela declares what amounts to martial law. Eugene is arrested and put on trial. The trial is a farce, a show designed to make an example. Eugene's trial is one of the emotional centerpieces of the final season. Here is a man who spent years lying, manipulating, and hiding behind stronger people. A man who once fabricated a cure to the apocalypse to keep himself alive. And now he's standing up for the truth, knowing it will cost him everything. Eugene has found something worth more than survival. He's found principles. He's found people he loves. And he won't betray them, not even to save himself. The verdict is guilty. Eugene is sentenced to death. But the execution never happens, because by this point, the Commonwealth is eating itself from the inside out. Daryl, Carol, Maggie, and the others who have been scattered by Lance's takeover begin to regroup. They find each other in the wilderness, They make contact with allies inside the Commonwealth, and they start planning. Not just an escape, but a revolution. They're not going to run from the Commonwealth. They're going to take it back. Not for themselves, but for the tens of thousands of ordinary people who are trapped inside it, living under Pamela's boot. General Mercer becomes a crucial ally. Mercer is the head of the Commonwealth's military, a career soldier who takes his duty seriously. He's been loyal to the Commonwealth for years, but he's not blind. He sees the corruption. He sees the injustice. He sees Pamela sacrificing ordinary people to protect her own power. And eventually, his conscience wins. Mercer quietly begins to work with the coalition, providing intelligence, positioning sympathetic soldiers, and preparing for the moment when everything comes to a head. The coalition's plan is audacious. They're going to infiltrate the Commonwealth, free their people, and overthrow Pamela's government. It's a coup, essentially, but one driven by the belief that the Commonwealth can be better. That 50,000 people deserve a real community, not a dictatorship dressed up as democracy. The plan involves multiple teams. Some will breach the Commonwealth's walls. Some will free the prisoners, including Eugene. Some will secure the armory. And some will confront Pamela directly. It's the most coordinated operation the show has ever depicted, and it requires every character we have left to play their part. Lance Hornsby, who's been the architect of so much suffering, meets his end before the final battle. He's been playing all sides for so long that he's lost track of his own alliances. Maggie is the one who kills him. She puts an arrow through his neck. It's not dramatic. It's not a speech. She just kills him, because Lance Hornsby is the kind of man who will never stop scheming, never stop manipulating, never stop hurting people. And sometimes the only way to deal with that kind of person is to end them. Maggie learned that lesson a long time ago. With Lance dead and the coalition assembled, the stage is set for the final battle of The Walking Dead. Everything the show has built over 11 seasons, every alliance, every betrayal, every lesson about survival and community, and the cost of violence, it all comes down to what happens next inside the walls of the Commonwealth. I know we're getting close to the end now, and I want to take a moment before we get to the finale to just sit with that for a second. 11 seasons, 12 years, 177 episodes. We've travelled from a small-town sheriff's deputy waking up alone in a hospital to this massive 50,000-person city teetering on the edge of revolution. The scale of this story is genuinely staggering when you step back and look at it. And through all of it, through the farm and the prison and Alexandria and the Saviours and the Whisperers and now the Commonwealth, the fundamental question has never changed. What are you willing to do to protect the people you love? How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice? And when the danger passes, if it ever passes, is there enough of you left to build something worth living in? Those questions are about to be answered. One last time, let's finish this story. The series finale of The Walking Dead is called Rest in Peace. It aired on November 20th, 2022, 12 years and 3 weeks after the pilot premiere. And it has the impossible task of ending a story that has been running for over a decade, with dozens of characters, multiple communities, and a world that has expanded far beyond anything the first season could have imagined. The finale begins in chaos. The Commonwealth is in crisis. The Coalition's plan is in motion. Teams are moving through the city, freeing prisoners, securing key positions, and rallying Commonwealth citizens who are fed up with Pamela's regime. Eugene is freed from his cell. The underground newspaper has done its work, and the people of the Commonwealth are awake to the corruption they've been living under. But Pamela doesn't go quietly. She orders her loyalist soldiers to hold the line. She retreats to the estates, the wealthy gated neighbourhood where the elite live, and she orders the gates sealed. The message is clear. The estates will be protected. Everyone else is on their own. And then the walkers come. A massive herd, drawn by the noise and chaos of the battle, descends on the Commonwealth. Thousands of walkers breach the outer walls and flood into the streets. The lower-class neighbourhoods are hit first, because of course they are. The people without walls, without gates, without private security, they're the ones who face the dead. Pamela, behind the estate's gates, is willing to let them die. She's willing to sacrifice thousands of her own citizens to preserve her enclave. The Coalition fights on two fronts now. They're fighting Pamela's soldiers, and they're fighting the herd. The streets are pandemonium. Gunfire, screaming, walkers everywhere. Characters we've followed for years are running through smoke and rubble, trying to save as many people as they can while the world comes apart around them. Jules and Luke are killed during the herd. Luke, the gentle man who believed in music and art and the preservation of culture, is bitten and dies. His death is quick and painful, and it's one of those losses that feels especially cruel because Luke represented something good, something pure. He wasn't a warrior. He was an artist who happened to survive the apocalypse, and the apocalypse finally caught up with him. The most devastating loss of the finale, though, is Rosita. Rosita Espinosa has been on the show since season 4. She arrived with Abraham and Eugene, and over the years she evolved from a supporting character into one of the show's fiercest, most capable survivors. She's a fighter. She's a mother. She has a daughter named Coco, and Coco is everything to her. During the chaos of the Commonwealth battle, Rosita learns that the children, including Coco, are trapped in the children's home on the other side of the city. Walkers are everywhere. The streets are impassable. It doesn't matter. Rosita goes. She fights through the herd, climbs walls, kills walkers with her bare hands. She reaches the children's home and rescues Coco and the other kids. But during the rescue, Rosita's bitten. On the shoulder. She feels it happen. She looks down and sees the wound. And she makes a choice. She doesn't tell anyone. Not yet. There are children to save. There's a battle to win. The bite is a death sentence, and she knows it, but she's not going to let it stop her from doing what needs to be done. Rosita gets Coco to safety. She fights until the battle is over. She helps. She contributes. She doesn't sit down and give up. And only after everything is secured, after the herd is dealt with and the battle is won, does she finally tell the people she loves. Rosita dies the next day, peacefully, surrounded by the people who care about her. Eugene is there, and he's holding her hand, and he's crying in that unguarded, open way that Eugene has always cried, without pretense or composure. Gabriel is there. Others are there. Rosita holds Coco one last time, and then she lets go. What makes Rosita's death work, what makes it hurt so deeply, is how quiet it is. After 12 years of violent, sudden, shocking deaths on this show, Rosita doesn't go out in a blaze of glory. She doesn't die in combat. She dies in a bed with people she loves around her, knowing that her daughter is safe. There's something almost gentle about it, something final in a way that feels earned rather than cheap. Rosita fought the entire apocalypse and survived everything it threw at her, and in the end, she chose how her last hours would be spent. She chose love. She chose presence. She chose Coco. I think Rosita's death is one of the most beautiful and most heartbreaking moments in the entire series. It doesn't try to shock you. It doesn't try to make you angry. It just sits with you, like grief does, and it asks you to feel it. Now, back to the battle itself. The coalition's assault on the estates reaches its climax. Pamela's soldiers are at the gates, weapons raised, ready to fire on anyone who tries to enter. On the other side, thousands of Commonwealth citizens are pressing forward, desperate for safety, with walkers closing in behind them. Daryl steps forward. Daryl Dixon, the man who barely spoke in Season 1, who communicated primarily through grunts and crossbow bolts, who spent most of his life believing he didn't matter, stands in front of Pamela's soldiers and delivers one of the most important speeches of the series. He doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten. He looks the soldiers in the eye and tells them the truth. He tells them that the people behind him, the citizens they're about to shoot, are the same people they swore to protect. He tells them that Pamela is asking them to sacrifice innocent lives to save the powerful. He tells them that this isn't what the Commonwealth was supposed to be. And the soldiers lower their weapons. One by one they step aside. The gates open. The citizens of the Commonwealth pour into the estates, and for the first time, the walls between the classes come down. The wealthy and the workers stand together, and together they face the herd. General Mercer arrests Pamela. She resists briefly, but it's over. Her authority is gone. The soldiers follow Mercer now. Pamela is taken into custody, and the Commonwealth, for the first time in its existence, is free of her control. The herd is dealt with through a coordinated effort. The Commonwealth has engineers, and those engineers rig explosives that channel the walkers into a kill zone. The dead are destroyed. The streets are cleared. The Commonwealth survives, battered and changed, but alive. And then there's a quiet moment, the morning after. The smoke is clearing. People are starting to pick up the pieces, and the characters we've followed for 11 seasons begin to say goodbye. Not to each other, necessarily, but to us, to the audience. Because this is the end. The show jumps forward 1 year, and in that year, everything has changed. Ezekiel is elected governor of the Commonwealth, not through violence or intimidation, but through a vote. The man who used to pretend to be a king is now a real leader, chosen by the people because they trust him, because he earned it. General Mercer serves as his lieutenant governor. Carol works alongside Ezekiel as his chief advisor, his deputy, his partner. Carol, who killed a child in a field to protect a baby. Carol, who burned people alive at Terminus. Carol, who lost her daughter and her adopted son and her sense of self and rebuilt all of it piece by piece, is now helping to govern a city of 50,000 people. That's a hell of a journey. Eugene and Max are together. They have a daughter. They named her Rosie, after Rosita. Eugene is a father, which is something he never thought he'd be, something he never thought he deserved to be. He's still awkward. He still talks too much, but he's happy, genuinely happy, in a way we've never seen him before. Maggie is rebuilding the hilltop. It's her home, her legacy, the place Glenn loved, the place where Herschel Jr. is growing up. Maggie has made something of it, and she's going to keep making something of it, because that's what Maggie does. She builds, even when the world tears everything down, Maggie builds. And then there's Negan. Negan approaches Maggie in the final episode, and he apologizes. Not the kind of apology that expects forgiveness. Not the kind that's performed for an audience. He tells her simply and sincerely that he's sorry for what he took from her. He knows he can't fix it. He knows no words will ever be enough. But he needs her to know that he understands what he did. And he carries it with him every day. Maggie listens, and when he's done, she tells him the truth. She will never forgive him. She can't. The best she can offer is the acknowledgement that he has done good since then, that he has earned his place among the living, that she's not going to kill him. But forgiveness? No, that door is closed. Negan accepts this. He nods, and he quietly leaves. He walks away from the communities, away from everyone he knows, into an uncertain future. He doesn't belong anywhere, and maybe he never will. But he's alive, and he's trying, and in this world, that has to count for something. Negan's departure leads directly into the Dead City spin-off, which follows him and Maggie in Manhattan. But that's a story for another night. And then there's Daryl, the man who showed up in the first season as a belligerent redneck with a crossbow and no social skills, and who became, over the course of 12 years, the beating heart of the show. Daryl says goodbye in the finale, and it's one of the most emotional scenes in the episode. He goes to Carol first, because of course he does. Daryl and Carol, their relationship is one of the most beautiful things The Walking Dead ever created. It's not romantic, not exactly, although you could argue there's love there that goes deeper than romance. It's a bond between two people who found each other at the worst possible time and held on. Carol was an abused, terrified woman hiding behind her husband's shadow when Daryl first met her. Daryl was a feral, angry man living in his brother's orbit, and over 11 seasons they saved each other. Not once, not twice, over and over and over again. Daryl tells Carol he has to go. He needs to find Rick and Michonne. He doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know if they're alive, but he needs to look. He owes Rick that much. He owes himself that much. And Carol understands, because Carol always understands Daryl, even when he can't articulate what he's feeling. She tells him to go. She tells him she'll be fine. She tells him she loves him, in her way, in the way that doesn't need the actual words. Daryl says goodbye to Judith and RJ, Rick and Michonne's children. Judith has been Daryl's shadow for years. He helped raise her. He protected her. He taught her things. Looking at Judith is like looking at Rick and Laurie and Carl and Michonne all at once. All the people he loved compressed into one fierce little person. Daryl kneels down and tells Judith he'll come back. He tells her to take care of her brother. He tells her that her dad would be proud of her. and he means it with everything he has. And then Daryl rides off on his motorcycle, the crossbow on his back, the road ahead of him. No destination, just a direction. He's heading out into the unknown, looking for the people he lost, carrying the memory of everyone he's found. Daryl's departure feeds into his own spin-off series, which picks up with him in France of all places. How Daryl Dixon ends up in France is a whole separate story, and it's as wild as it sounds. But for the main series, his exit is a departure in the truest sense. He's leaving home to find home. Now, the series could have ended there. 1 year later, the community's rebuilding. The characters finding their versions of peace. Daryl on the road, Negan in the wind, Carol in the government, Eugene in love, Maggie at the hilltop. It would have been a complete ending. Quiet and a little bittersweet. But the show has one more card to play. After the credits roll, there's a final scene. And it brings back the two people whose absence has defined the back half of the series. We see Rick Grimes. He's older now, thinner, wearing rough clothes that suggest captivity more than freedom. He's sitting on a riverbank, writing a letter, writing to Michonne. He folds the letter carefully, puts it in a bottle with others, and throws it into the water. It's all he can do. Wherever Rick is, he's a prisoner. The CRM, the Civic Republic military, the organisation that took him on the helicopter all those years ago, has him. He hasn't escaped. He hasn't stopped trying. And then we see Michonne. She's on horseback, riding with a caravan of people. She's not in Alexandria. She's not behind walls. She's out in the world, searching. She found the clues Rick left behind, the phone with the drawings, the boots on the island, and she followed them. She's been following them for years, and she hasn't given up. The final shot of The Walking Dead, the very last image of the flagship series, alternates between Rick and Michonne. Both of them out there, both of them alive, both of them fighting to get back to each other. The love story that started on a couch in Alexandria, that survived the apocalypse and the saviors and the whisperers, is still going. It's not resolved, it's not finished, but it's alive, and over this final image, we hear a voiceover. It's Judith, Rick and Laurie's daughter, the baby born in a prison, raised in the apocalypse, who has never known a world that wasn't broken. And Judith says, the line that gives the spin-off its name, the line that serves as the thesis statement for the entire 12-year journey of The Walking Dead. We're the ones who live, and that's it. The screen goes black. The music fades. The show is over. I have to tell you, the first time I heard that line, I just sat there for a minute. I didn't move. I didn't check my phone. I didn't start looking for the next thing to watch. I just sat with it. Because that line isn't just about Rick and Michonne. It's about everyone. Every character who fought through this story. Every person who died and every person who survived. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of horror and every moment of grace. They were all in service of that one simple idea. We are the ones who live. We choose to live. We fight to live. We endure the unimaginable. And we keep going. Not because the world is kind or fair or safe, but because the alternative is nothing. The Walking Dead is a show about survival, yes. But more than that, it's a show about what survival costs and whether the price is worth paying. For 12 years, it asked that question in 100 different ways, and it never settled on a single answer, because there isn't one. The answer changes depending on who you are, what you've lost, and what you still have to fight for. For Rick, it was his family. For Maggie, it was Glenn's legacy. For Carol, it was the chance to become someone better than the world tried to make her. For Daryl, it was the discovery that he mattered. For Negan, it was the long, uncertain road from monster to man. The show didn't end perfectly. No show that runs for 12 years and 177 episodes ends perfectly. There are storylines that went nowhere, characters who deserved better, seasons that dragged, and creative decisions that still spark arguments. But when I think about The Walking Dead as a whole, what stays with me isn't the frustrations. It's the moments. Shane in the moonlit field, Sophia walking out of the barn, Laurie dying in the prison, Herschel's head on the governor's sword, Glenn saying, "I'll find you," Carl writing letters by candlelight, Rick blowing up the bridge, Rosita holding Coco one last time. Those moments are what television is for. They're the reason we sit down in front of a screen and let someone tell us a story, because the best stories make us feel something real. And The Walking Dead, for all its flaws, made us feel something real over and over and over again. We're almost done now. Just a few more thoughts, and then I'll let you rest. If you're still with me, and honestly, I hope you're drifting off by now, because that's the whole point of this. But if you're still with me, I want to take a little time to just reflect on what we've been through. Not just the plot, not just who died and who survived, but what it all means. What The Walking Dead was really about, underneath the walkers and the blood and the barbed wire. The first thing I think about when I think about this show is how it handled the idea of community. That's the real through line of the whole series. More than survival, more than violence. It's about people trying to build something together. Every season, in some form, the characters are either building a community, defending a community, losing a community, or searching for a community. The quarry camp, the farm, the prison, Alexandria, the hilltop, the kingdom, the Commonwealth. Each one is an attempt to answer the same question. Can human beings live together, protect each other, and maintain some version of civilization when everything that used to hold that civilization together has disappeared? And the show's answer, if it has one, is complicated. Yes, people can build communities. They can grow food and raise children and create councils and hold elections. But those communities are always fragile. They're always under threat, not just from walkers or from outside enemies, but from the people inside them. From selfishness, from fear, from the human tendency to accumulate power and hoard resources. The Commonwealth is the ultimate expression of this idea. It's the most successful community in the show. 50,000 people with running water and electricity and hospitals. And it's also the most corrupt. Because building a community is easy compared to building a just community. And the show never quite figured out how to do the latter, because to be fair, neither has the real world. The second thing I think about is the evolution of morality in this world. The Walking Dead is a long, slow argument about ethics. At the beginning, Rick Grimes tries to be a good man. He tries to do the right thing. He tries to uphold the law, or at least the spirit of the law, in a world without laws. And the show systematically strips that away from him. Not all at once, but piece by piece over years. Rick kills Shane. Rick bites Joe's throat. Rick slaughters the Terminus survivors in a church. Rick attacks the Savior outpost in their sleep. At each step, Rick tells himself it's necessary. It's for his family. It's for the group. And at each step, the Rick who existed before gets a little smaller, and the Rick who replaces him gets a little harder. But then Carl dies, and Carl's dying wish is for his father to stop, to choose mercy, to break the cycle. And Rick does. He spares Negan. He breaks his own pattern. He doesn't give in to the rage that has defined him for years. And that choice, that single act of mercy, reshapes the world of the show. It leads to the communities cooperating. It leads to Negan's imprisonment and eventual transformation. It leads, years later, to a future that Carl imagined but never got to see. Whether you think Rick was right to spare Negan depends entirely on how you define justice. Maggie never forgave him for it. A lot of viewers never forgave him for it. Glenn's death demanded blood, and Rick refused to pay. But the show argues, quietly, and through the actions of its characters rather than through speeches, that mercy isn't weakness. It's a choice, a hard one. And sometimes it's the choice that saves not just the person you're showing mercy to, but the person you are. Rick could have killed Negan and satisfied his rage, but he would have lost the last piece of himself that Carl loved. The third thing I think about is the women of this show. The Walking Dead didn't always handle its female characters well, especially in the early seasons. Laurie was often written as frustrating and contradictory. Andrea's arc on the show was a pale shadow of her comic counterpart. Beth was underserved before she was killed. The show's treatment of women was, for a while, a legitimate criticism. But as the show matured, so did its female characters, or rather, the writing finally caught up to the performances the actresses had been giving all along. Carol's transformation from abused wife to one of the most formidable survivors in the apocalypse is arguably the single best character arc in the entire series. Carol didn't get a sudden power-up or a dramatic turning point. She changed slowly, over years, through grief and violence and love and loss, until the woman who once flinched at her husband's voice became the woman who single-handedly destroyed Terminus. Michonne was a warrior from her first appearance, but the show gave her layers over time. Her relationship with Rick, her bond with Carl and Judith, her leadership of Alexandria, her decision to leave everything behind to search for the man she loves. Michonne was never just a fighter. She was a mother, a partner, a leader, and one of the most intelligent people in the show's universe. Maggie's journey from a farmer's daughter to the leader of the hilltop, to a woman who can look at her husband's killer and choose not to forgive him, but to let him live. That's growth that spans a decade of storytelling. Maggie didn't become hard because the world demanded it. She became strong because the alternative was to give up. And Maggie Green doesn't give up. Ever. Rosita, Sasha, Tara, Enid, Connie, Princess, Yumiko. The later seasons populated the show with women who were competent, complex, flawed, and fully realised. Not every one of them got the screen time they deserved, but they all contributed to a show that, by its end, understood that the apocalypse is not a boys' club. I also want to talk about the show's relationship with hope. Because The Walking Dead is often described as a dark show, and it is. People die constantly. The world is cruel. The villains are monstrous. The moral compromises are sickening. But underneath all of that darkness, there's a persistent, stubborn thread of hope that never goes away. It's in Dale, sitting on top of his RV, watching the sunset, believing that civilization still matters. It's in Glenn, running through the streets of Atlanta to save a stranger, because that's who he is. It's in Herschel, learning to walk on one leg and smiling at his grandchild. It's in Beth, singing in a funeral home with Daryl, finding beauty in the ruins. It's in Carl, writing letters by candlelight, imagining a future he'll never see. It's in Judith, carrying her father's hat and her father's gun, and her father's belief that people are worth saving. The show never lets hope win easily. It never promises that things will be okay, but it also never fully extinguishes the flame. And I think that's honest. I think that's truer to life than either pure despair or easy optimism. The world is hard. People suffer. People die. And still, somehow, other people wake up the next morning and try again. That's the real survival story. Not the physical act of staying alive, but the spiritual act of refusing to stop caring. Now, for anyone who's curious about what happened after the main series ended, there are the spin-offs. And while tonight is really about the flagship show, let me give you a quick rundown, because some of these continue stories we've been following for over a decade. Dead City picks up with Maggie and Negan in Manhattan. Yes, New York City. The show takes these two characters, who have every reason to hate each other, and forces them to work together in one of the most dangerous environments imaginable. Manhattan is flooded, overrun, and home to new threats. The dynamic between Maggie and Negan, the unresolvable tension between them, is the engine that drives the series. It's a smaller show than The Walking Dead, more focused, and Lauren Cohan and Jeffrey Dean Morgan are both excellent in it. Daryl Dixon follows Daryl in France. Through circumstances that are explained in the show, Daryl ends up across the Atlantic, in a country he's never been to, surrounded by people whose language he doesn't speak. It's a fish-out-of-water story, which sounds bizarre for a character like Daryl, but it works. Norman Reedus carries the show with the same quiet intensity he's brought to the character for 12 years. Carol joins him in the second season, and their dynamic is as strong as ever. The Ones Who Live is the show a lot of fans had been waiting for since Rick disappeared on that helicopter. It follows Rick and Michonne as they navigate the Civic Republic military and try to find their way back to each other. Andrew Lincoln and Danai Gurira return, and the show is essentially a love story, wrapped in a thriller, wrapped in a political drama. It answers the question of what happened to Rick Grimes, and it does so in a way that honours the character's 12-year journey. There was also Tales of the Walking Dead, an anthology series that told standalone stories within the universe, and Fear the Walking Dead, which ran for 8 seasons and followed a different group of survivors starting from the very beginning of the outbreak on the West Coast. Fear had some incredible highs in its early seasons before going through some controversial creative changes later on. The Walking Dead universe is still expanding, which is both impressive and a little exhausting. The franchise has been running, in some form, continuously since 2010. That's over 15 years of this world. Whether you followed every spin-off, or just watched the main show, the sheer scope of it is remarkable. But for me, the story that matters most, the story that started everything, the story I've been telling you tonight, is the one that began with a man waking up alone in a hospital and ended with his daughter's voice telling us that we're the ones who live. That's the story. That's The Walking Dead. And whatever you think of its later seasons, whatever frustrations you had with creative decisions or character deaths or storylines that went nowhere, the core of it, the heart of it, is a story about people who refused to give up, who found each other in the worst possible circumstances and held on, who built communities and lost them and built them again, who loved imperfectly and grieved deeply and fought like hell for one more day. It's not a perfect show, but it's a show that tried to tell the truth about what it means to be human. And on its best days, it succeeded. You know, one thing I keep coming back to, even now, is how much this show changed the way people talk about television. Before The Walking Dead, horror was a genre that mostly lived in movies. 2-hour experiences. Jump scares, final girls, credits, done. The idea that you could build a horror show that ran for 12 years, that had character development and political commentary and love stories and philosophical debates about morality, and that it would become the biggest thing on cable television, that would have sounded insane in 2009. Horror wasn't supposed to be appointment television. It wasn't supposed to make people cry. It wasn't supposed to make you think about the nature of community and leadership and forgiveness and justice, while also showing you a tiger getting eaten by zombies. But The Walking Dead did all of that. It proved that genre television could be prestige television, or at least that the line between them was thinner than anyone thought. It opened doors for shows that came after it, shows that blended horror with drama, that used supernatural or speculative settings to tell deeply human stories. You can draw a straight line from The Walking Dead's success to the explosion of genre programming that followed in the 2010s and beyond. It also changed the way shows interact with their audiences. The Walking Dead was one of the first major shows of the social media era, and its relationship with fans was intense, sometimes toxic, and always passionate. The debates after each episode were massive. Who should lead? Who should die? Who was right and who was wrong? Glenn's dumpster fake out in season 6, where the show made it look like Glenn died under a dumpster, only to reveal weeks later that he survived, nearly broke the internet. The Negan cliffhanger at the end of season 6 literally changed how networks think about season finales. The backlash to Carl's death influenced how the showrunners handled subsequent departures. For better or worse, The Walking Dead was a show that existed in constant dialogue with its audience. It listened, sometimes too much, sometimes not enough, and it evolved in response to the conversation happening around it. That's a uniquely modern phenomenon. Shows from earlier eras were made in relative isolation from their viewers. The Walking Dead was made in the middle of a crowd, and the crowd was always shouting. I think that's part of why people have such strong feelings about it, even years later. It wasn't just a show you watched. It was a show you participated in. You had opinions. You had favourites. You had characters you rooted for, and characters you wanted dead. You argued with strangers on the internet about whether Rick was a good leader or a dangerous lunatic. You mourned characters like you'd lost real friends. You celebrated when the group found safety, and you raged when that safety was taken away. That kind of engagement doesn't happen with most television. It happens with shows that tap into something real, something primal. The Walking Dead tapped into our fear of losing everything, our hope of building something new, and our endless fascination with the question of what we'd do if the rules went away. Would you be a Rick, a Carol, a Negan, a Eugene? Would you fight or hide or run or build? Would you hold on to your humanity or let it go? I think about the actors too, the people who gave years of their lives to these roles. Andrew Lincoln spent 9 years as Rick Grimes, and by the end you couldn't tell where Lincoln stopped and Rick began. The exhaustion, the grief, the quiet determination, it all felt real because Lincoln made it real. Norman Reedus took a character who wasn't even in the comics and turned him into the most popular person on the show. Melissa McBride's transformation as Carol is one of the great acting achievements in television period. Stephen Yeun brought such warmth and decency to Glenn that his death felt like losing someone you actually knew. Jeffrey Dean Morgan took a character who should have been a one-note villain and turned him into the most complex figure in the series. Lauren Cohan, Danai Gurira, Chandler Riggs, Scott Wilson, Emily Kinney, Sonequa Martin Green, Josh McDermott, Christian Serratos, Seth Gilliam, Kari Payton, Ross Marquand, every single one of them gave everything they had to characters who lived in a world that could kill them at any moment. And every single one of them made you forget you were watching a television show. That's a gift. That's what great acting is. It's the ability to make a fictional person feel like someone you know, someone you'd miss, someone whose death would leave a hole in your life. The Walking Dead had flaws in its writing, in its pacing, in its creative decisions. But it almost never had flaws in its performances. The cast was extraordinary from beginning to end. And whatever frustrations I have with the show, I have nothing but admiration for the people who brought it to life. Every viewer answered those questions differently, and every answer said something about the person giving it. That's the legacy of The Walking Dead, not the ratings or the merchandise or the spin-offs, or the theme park attractions or the video games, or the countless imitators that tried and failed to capture what made this show special. The real legacy is the conversations, the arguments, the tears, the moments where you sat in the dark, alone on your couch or in your bed, and thought about what kind of person you'd be at the end of the world. The moments where a fictional character's death made you feel something so real that it scared you a little. I hope the answer, if you ever have to find out, is that you'd be one of the ones who live. One of the ones who keep going, who hold on, who refuse to let the world take everything. Anyway, I've been rambling, but that's kind of what these things are for. Long, slow, wandering conversations about stories that meant something to us. And before I truly let you go, I want to do one last thing. I want to go through the people we lost. Not all of them, because there are too many, but the ones who mattered most. The ones who left a mark on this story, and on everyone who watched it. Shane Walsh, Rick's best friend. The man who kept Laurie and Carl alive when Rick couldn't. Shane was wrong about a lot of things, but he wasn't wrong about the world changing. He just couldn't change with it in a way that let him keep his soul. He died in a moonlit field, killed by the man he loved like a brother, and he became the first proof that everyone turns, no matter how they die. Dale Horvath, the moral compass, the man on the RV who watched the sunset and believed that being civilized still mattered. Dale was the conscience of the group, and when he died, the group lost something it never fully recovered. He was old and stubborn and naive, and absolutely right about almost everything. Sophia Pelletier, Carol's daughter, the girl who walked out of the barn and broke everyone's hearts. Sophia's death was the end of innocence for the group, the moment when hope became something you held carefully, like glass because you knew it could shatter at any time. Laurie Grimes, Rick's wife, a complicated character who was often more interesting than the show knew how to handle. She died giving birth to Judith in a corridor on concrete with her son standing over her. Whatever you thought of Laurie, that scene was devastating. And Carl, having to prevent her from turning, was one of the cruelest things the show ever asked of a child. Merle Dixon, Daryl's brother, loud, racist, violent, and somehow at the very end, capable of selflessness. Merle died trying to kill the governor, trying to protect Daryl, trying to do one good thing after a lifetime of bad ones. Daryl finding him as a walker is one of those images that stays with you. Andrea, the woman who deserved better from the writers. Andrea in the comics was a sharpshooter, a leader, a survivor. Andrea on the show was underserved, and her death in Woodbury felt like a waste. But Laurie Holden gave that role everything she had, and Andrea's final moments with Michonne are genuinely moving. Herschel Green, the heart of the prison, the man who taught Rick that you could be strong and gentle at the same time. Herschel's death, on his knees in front of his family, killed by a madman with a sword, was the show's way of telling you that goodness is not armor. Goodness doesn't protect you. But it matters anyway. Beth Green, Herschel's daughter, the girl who sang in the darkness and found light in the most unexpected places. Beth's death was sudden and senseless, and it felt like a cruel joke, which is exactly the point. Not everyone gets a meaningful death. Some people just die, mid-sentence, mid-growth, mid-everything. And the world keeps going. Tyrese Williams, a giant of a man with the gentlest heart. Tyrese didn't want to fight. He wanted to hold babies and build fences and believe that people could still be good. His death, hallucinating in a stranger's bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of the dead, was one of the most surreal and beautiful sequences the show ever produced. Abraham Ford, red-haired, profane, and utterly fearless. Abraham faced Negan's bat with his eyes open, and his middle finger raised, metaphorically speaking. His last words were, "Suck my nuts," which is either the bravest or the most absurd final statement in television history. Possibly both. Abraham deserved more time. He was just starting to figure out who he wanted to be. Glenn Rhee, the pizza delivery guy, the one who saved Rick, the one who loved Maggie, the one who believed all the way to the end that you could survive this world without becoming a monster. Glenn's death was the death that changed the show. It was the death that millions of viewers couldn't forgive. And his last words, "Maggie, I'll find you," are the kind of thing that stays in your chest like a bruise that never fully heals. Sasha Williams, a woman of incredible strength who chose to die on her own terms rather than be used as a weapon. Sasha took a poison pill inside Negan's coffin and came out the other side as a walker, attacking the man who would have paraded her corpse in front of her friends. Even in death she fought. Carl Grimes, Rick's son, the boy who grew up in the apocalypse and somehow kept his humanity. Carl's death was controversial, and I understand why. He was supposed to be the future. He was supposed to carry the story forward, to be the one who inherits the world his father fought to build. Instead, he died at 16 from a walker bite sustained while helping a stranger. But his dying wish, his plea for mercy, his vision of a future without war, that became the compass that guided the rest of the series. Carl didn't live to see the world he imagined, but he made it possible. Jesus, Paul Rovia, the ninja-like scout from the hilltop, who could do backflips and pickpockets and disarm people with a smile. Jesus was killed by the Whisperers before anyone even knew what the Whisperers were, and his death was a door opening onto a new kind of horror. Alpha and Beta, the leaders of the Whisperers. Alpha, who stripped away everything human and called it strength. Beta, who worshipped her with a devotion that bordered on insanity. Both of them terrifying. Both of them, in their own way, deeply sad. They chose to live among the dead because they couldn't face the pain of living among the living. And Rosita Espinosa, the fighter who went out on her own terms, bitten while saving her daughter, dying the next day in a bed surrounded by love, with Eugene holding her hand. Rosita's death wasn't about shock or spectacle. It was about grace. The grace of knowing your child is safe. The grace of being held by people who love you as you go. There are so many others. T-Dog, who died holding a door open so Carol could escape. Bob, who laughed at cannibals because he was already dead. Denise shot through the eye mid-sentence. Enid killed by Alpha and placed on a pike. Henry the same. Tara the same. Ezekiel's tiger, Shiva, who died saving her king. Every one of them mattered. Every one of them left a space in the story that nothing else could fill. The Walking Dead ran for 12 years on AMC. It premiered on Halloween night, 2010, and it ended on November 20th, 2022. 177 episodes. 11 seasons. At its peak, it was the most watched show on cable television, pulling in over 17 million viewers for a single episode. It launched careers, generated billions of dollars, inspired theme park attractions, video games, and a franchise that continues to expand. But more than any of that, it was a show that people cared about. Really, genuinely cared about. The kind of show that made you text your friends at midnight to say, "Did you see that?" The kind of show that made you cry on your couch, alone, at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, because a character you'd spent years with was suddenly gone. The kind of show that stayed with you, that you thought about while driving to work or lying in bed or staring out a window. The characters became real. Their losses became your losses. Their victories, rare and hard won, felt like your victories too. That's the magic of long-form storytelling. When a show runs for a decade, The characters don't just exist on screen. They grow up alongside you. You change, and they change, and somehow you end up at the same place at the same time, and it feels like a reunion. Watching the finale of The Walking Dead, after 12 years of investment, is not the same as watching the finale of a show you binged in a weekend. The weight of it is different. The goodbye is heavier, because it's not just a show ending, it's a relationship ending. A long one. And now it's over. The story has been told. From Rick waking up in that hospital bed, to Judith's voice, in the dark, telling us that we're the ones who live. It's done. And here we are, on the other side of it, a little tired, a little emotional, carrying the memory of people who never existed, but who felt as real as anyone we've ever known. All right, that really is everything. We've gone through the entire story of The Walking Dead, start to finish. Every season, every major death, every turn and twist and heartbreak. If you manage to stay awake through all of that, first of all, I'm impressed and a little concerned. This was supposed to put you to sleep. But if you're still here, I'm glad for the company. And if you drifted off somewhere along the way, if you fell asleep during the prison arc, or the Saviour's War, or Negan's redemption, that's exactly what was supposed to happen. The story will be here whenever you want to come back to it. You can always rewind. You can always pick up where you left off. There's no rush, so settle in. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. Let the last images of the story wash over you, whatever they might be. Maybe it's Rick riding a horse into Atlanta. Maybe it's Glenn underneath a dumpster. Maybe it's Daryl on his motorcycle, heading out into the unknown. Whatever image stays with you, let it be a good one. The night is quiet. The story is told. The dead are at rest. And you, right now, in whatever room you're in, under whatever blanket you've pulled up to your chin, you're safe. You're warm. You're here. Sweet dreams. And I'll see you in the next one.